Ooh, now I'm so curious. You're driving me crazy.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of 119, the Twin Peaks podcast. Today, we're here to talk about part 17 of Twin Peaks The Return, The Past Dictates the Future. My name is Nick. I am joined, as always, by Dylan. Hi, Dylan.
Hello.
And today, we are very happy to be joined by writer, YouTuber, musician, visual artist, a woman of many, many talents, Gisela Fleischer. Thanks so much for being on with us.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so I and a lot of Twin Peaks fans, I imagine, got introduced to you through your YouTube channel, which is called Garment Bosia, where you did reaction videos, live reaction videos to a lot of episodes of Twin Peaks The Return. I think pretty much all the episodes in the back half of the season. I think you started with, episode 9, right?
Yeah, that's right, because episode 8 aired. All of you know that was an episode that pretty much blew people's minds, right? So I would given a lot of money to see myself in that situation, actually. And I didn't know that reaction videos were a thing, but I figured maybe I'd give it a try, so I did. And I did it for fun, and I started out without expectations, thinking that maybe 100 people would watch it or something. And it turned out that I had a lot of people begging me to do more. And some people too, who thought I sucked, but that's the way it goes on the internet, right? So
Sure is.
Yeah, I really appreciated your videos, not just because it's always great to see, another hardcore Twin Peaks fan reacting to these incredible, outrageous episodes, but also because you were able to pick up on a lot of stuff that I didn't pick up on the first time around, and I think most people didn't pick up on the first time around. Just little observations, little callbacks, little connections that I think a lot of people missed. I know that, for example, and we've referenced this on the show before, but you noticed in the Sarah Palmer scene in the grocery store that the sounds that were happening were the same sounds from Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which I totally would not have pieced together the first time around, but that was
okay.
Yeah, but your videos are just full of stuff like that, and I would recommend that everybody go and check out Gisela's reaction videos, because they really are a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. It makes me really happy to hear you say that, because I was not holding back. I'm not that kind of a person. So I think we're talking about part 17 today. And during those parts, I cried the last 2 parts. And also when the log lady died, I cried like a crybaby, and that's just the way I react to stuff like that, because Twin Peaks is really, very deep in my heart. So it's not a professional YouTuber video or stuff, because I'm just all over the place with my feelings, and I don't care. But some people don't like it, and I'm glad that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I really, I caught onto your videos pretty early. It got to the point where I would really look forward to seeing, how you reacted to stuff every day. So or every week,
wow,
rather.
Thanks.
So yeah, do you want to give people just a little bit of history, as far as your relationship with the show goes? How did you start watching Twin Peaks? Where are you at with The Return, and just generally your Twin Peaks journey?
Oh, okay. Well, I live in Sweden, and I grew up here, of course. back then when Twin Peaks aired, I was 9 years old, a little young, I think. And also, you know, I have never heard about that. In Sweden, we had like we have public service channels, 2 of them. And when I grew up, we didn't have any other channels basically. And since then we have, of course, but that was all, you know. And I had also Danish TV because I'm in the south of Sweden. But when I heard about this for the first time, I guess it was a part of my life where I was a bit older. Maybe I was 14 or 15, because I had friends that had started to pick it up. It was re-aired a couple of years later on one of the commercial channels, and some of my friends watched it and really just spoke about it all the time. And in my mind, because I wasn't really a TV nerd or anything like that, and I'm still not, but in my mind, a TV series like it was the same as a soap opera, basically, because we had all this Falcon Crest and Dallas, and actually, what is it called? Dynasty. I really loved Dynasty for some reason, but that was all I knew, you know. And we had like Sunset Beach, which is really the most crappiest thing I've ever seen. So I was kind of assuming that, well, it's another soap opera kind of thing. But someone just, I think someone just said to me, you have to see this, just take my word for this. And here's a bag of, or 2 tote bags, basically, of VHSs with crappy copied Twin Peaks episode on it, on them, so you can borrow them. And I say crappy, and it's not a word that really describes the quality at all, because it was really bad. VHSs that been copied like 1,000 times before I got them. So, but I started to watch it. But before I did, and this is something that if you have one regret in life, you know, that kind of thing, I did watch Fire Walk with Me before I watched the series.
Me too.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
And I have been thinking about that a lot lately, and I've come to the conclusion that some part of that, like, failure is actually not a failure, because I really got to love that dark, mystical feeling, because in my mind, Fire Walk with Me it has a special quality to it that you recognize from the series, but it's a bit different. Do you know what I mean? Fire Walk with Me is really dark and really surrealistic and mysterious. And since I live in Sweden, I was part of a team of friends that we were watching a movie for a movie night, and someone else chose the movie, and the movie that they had rented was Fire Walk with Me. And in that situation, it was the Fire Walk with Me international version, or the European version, or the international ending, or it's called. So it was like a feature film. So that's the one I watched. And I guess that means that I got all those weird scenes with Bob in the basement, and, you know, scenes that weren't really in Fire Walk with Me, and they, you know, it's really strange. Seriously, that's 2 different films, right? Because I watched Fire Walk with Me, and then
the pilot, right?
Because the European pilot was sort of conceived as its
exactly.
own movie.
I mixed them up.
Right, yeah.
First we saw Fire Walk with Me, and then I wanted to see more. So what I got my hands on before I got that tote bag, those tote bags full of VHSs, before that and after Fire Walk with Me, the only thing that I could find was the European version that I rented. So I had a completely mixed up order of watching Twin Peaks and getting introduced to it. But that's the way it was, and I had to just work from there. I couldn't do a lobotomy or something just to forget about it. Yeah, you just have to work with it. But it was like, oh, I already know who the killer is, you know. Kind of pissed me off. But now, when I think about it, I think those mysterious things that I got to see first of all, from the European version, and also of the pilot, and also from Fire Walk with Me, I think was what I was really into from the beginning. And I'm still very much into, I'm into Twin Peaks, like people are into Twin Peaks, but maybe from different perspectives or for different reasons. And I really love the mythology and the dark underlying themes of mysterious, you know, what is it, what's going on, and you cannot even exactly pinpoint what's going on sometimes, and I really like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you were pretty on board with Fire Walk with Me the first time you watched it then? Like you really enjoyed it despite not having really any context for any of the characters of the town and whatnot?
Exactly, yeah. That's the interesting part, that I just was drawn to Fire Walk with Me so much. And I had no idea because I had no context, you know?
Yeah.
It seemed as like it's a sequel, prequel kind of film, but
Yeah.
I was just watching it without context, and I liked it very much.
Yeah, I can't say I had the same experience with it. I think watching Fire Walk with Me actually probably prevented me from watching the show sooner. You know, I guess I was a teenager when I saw Fire Walk with Me. I was probably like 16 or something like that. And you know, just because I was going through the Lynch filmography at that point, I decided, well, you know, I know this is a prequel to Twin Peaks, so it just makes sense for me to watch it first, right? You know, of course, having no idea that the most important mystery of the show was going to be revealed to me in that movie. So, you know, I thought it was interesting, but, you know, I just, when you don't have that context as far as like, well, who's Donna, who's Bobby, who's Mike, like all these things, it just didn't really mean as much to me. And, you know, and when I saw that the show, you know, the whole central mystery was like, who killed Laura Palmer, I was like, well, I already know that. So why do I need to watch the show? You know what I mean? And of course, like the show, you know, that question is really just the springboard for a lot of other things. So it took me a few years to come around to it.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, so yeah, you in addition to your YouTube channel, you've also been writing for 25 years later, correct?
Yeah, that's right. When I heard about the return coming, I freaked out because I was like, I love this universe of Twin Peaks so much, and what you know, when the stakes are so high because you're really you don't want that, you know, if it's bad, if you don't like it, what the hell are you gonna do then, you know? So, but I liked it from the very start, and when it started airing, I had no contact with 25 years later site crew or the people around that, and I also didn't make the videos until, as you said, to part 9. So I was, so to speak, on my own. And what I did, because I'm a pretty badly, you know, Twin Peaks soiled freak, basically, and no one in my environment that I know of, that I speak with, you know, none of my friends are as heavy into Twin Peaks as I am. So I turned to the internet, and I was writing in all of the groups, and what about this and what about this, and at some point I wrote some, you know, it's a post that you make, but it was more like an article. Actually, it was pretty long, like a couple of thousand words or something, and I posted about Twin Peaks and alchemy, and the Twin Peaks group, that the one on Facebook that's now called Twin Peaks Between Two Worlds, one of the bigger ones, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was contacted by the crew, by Andrew and Cheryl from 25 Years Later site, and I guess I was headhunted or something for the site and started writing for them. So since then I was part of the crew. So that was a pleasant surprise. I hadn't imagined being that into it in that kind of way, but it just turned out that it worked out for me. I liked it, so I've been writing. You know, I'm one of those people who doesn't write like every week or even every month. But when I do write, I write like humongous articles, like 8,000 words. And then I take breaks and stuff. But it's fun. It's fun to write about something that I never done that before in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you're really into.
Yeah, we've had a few people from the 25 Years Later crew on the show so far. You know, we had John Bernardi and we had Andrew. Last week we had Aiden and Lindsay from Bickering Peaks. So you know we've really we're big fans of the site. Needless to say,
it's been growing ever since. So
yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah. So I guess let's just get into this particular episode, part 17. The past dictates the future.
Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds. Fire, walk with me.
So
sure.
Normally I would start off by asking our guest, like, hey, what did you think of this episode? What did you think when you first saw it? But I already know that because it's on YouTube.
Right.
And I know that your reaction was probably similar to mine and a lot of people's, which was like stunned,
intense,
disbelief,
Yes.
Lots of emotions flying all over the place.
Oh yes.
This is I mean, there's so much in this episode that ranks among the most shocking things I've ever seen on TV. I mean, when Cooper goes back in time into Fire Walk with Me, I was just like speechless. I just couldn't believe what was happening.
I agree with you. I mean, how could anyone have seen this coming? I was just stunned. So I know what you mean.
What about you, Dylan? What was going through your head through the madness that was this episode?
Yeah, it's similar to you guys. I was pretty speechless. I was, of all the things that I was maybe expecting, it was not a trip back to 1989. Like I just didn't. I didn't for in a million years expect that was the nature of Cooper's goal, because it's really interesting watching it now and trying to piece together some of the breadcrumbs of the plans that Cooper, the fireman, and Gordon seemed to be hip to. But at the first time watching it, as far as I was concerned, Cooper's only plan was to destroy Mr. C. That's what it seemed like was happening for me. And then when that happened, like 20 minutes into the episode, I was like, "Wait, what's about to happen now?" And yeah, I for sure was. I reacted pretty viscerally the first time when you get the black and white face of Coop, and then you are shown these images from Fire Walk with Me recognize it right away, and I think like I sort of intuitively knew what Cooper was trying to do at the moment, and got a really bad feeling about it. I was like, this is this is tenuous. This could go wrong in a lot of ways. But I was still just like I've never been as enamored with a scene, I don't think. Something that really took me into a whole new place where like I feel like I could have got a text message that said, "Hey, you just won $1 million," and I would have thrown my phone across the room like, "I'll deal with that later." What's going on here? Yeah, it's.
If the roof of my apartment would be blown off right then and there, I wouldn't care. You know, it's
exactly.
It was just so into it. It was ridiculous. Also, so I also recognize what you see.
And it was partially seeing or knowing that this was a two-parter that was even freaking me out even more, because like what I expected to happen in the finale period happened 20 minutes into the first part. So it had me hook, line, and sinker.
So that was what you were expecting for the final part?
More or less, I was expecting. I wrongfully assumed that Mr. C was the big bad evil guy of the return, and you're kind of told right off the bat in this episode, not necessarily. You really for the first time get an exposition on Judy. One that, at least watching now, I recognize for as evil and as powerful as Mr. C is, he is largely a pawn for both sides, it seems, for the fireman and for Judy. He's kind of he's really evil and powerful in our realm, but when it comes to these other types of forces, he is a bit of like a pawn. He was used, and how he was used is sort of remains to be seen, or like to whose end he truly benefited. But yeah, I did think that was sort of going to be a huge part of the resolution, like two Coopers facing off. How could this how can this go down? And it goes down, but it goes down early, and it left me really, really excited and just glued to my eyeballs were glued to the screen for the next hour and 40 minutes. Just nothing could stop me from finding out what happened. And I still didn't find out what happened, but I watched it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I was the only thing that I can think of, and I think I said this out loud in the reaction videos too. I was just thinking, this is wrong. You know, this is too easy. This is. I'm not saying it's wrong in the sense that, David Lynch and company failed in their mission to make the return, you know. It's just within the series, this is wrong, if you know what I mean. It's just something here is, and that's something that I thought about since then. I don't know if you noticed, but in the first episode, that first part, that was a two-parter actually, I think, that we got from the return. There's a lot of people saying the phrase, this something is wrong. Did you notice that?
Right, like Mike in the Red Room.
Yeah, Mike, and there's something wrong with James, and something is wrong, and something. I think at least 3 people that don't even know each other say that. And it feels like it's a message in some kind of way to us. And when it comes to the question, okay, if that's wrong, what's right? I'm not very sure. I'm not sure that there is a right, but it's just the fact that something is wrong. And I also felt that Cooper was making a big mistake.
I had a similar feeling as I was watching this whole, quote unquote resolution go down with the destruction of Bob and the death of Mr. C and Cooper going to save Laura. It all seemed a little bit too neat. And I think the fact that I knew that there was a whole episode left really reinforced that feeling. Like,
yes,
you know, this is not the way that this is going to end. It isn't going to be easy. And, you know, I've seen David Lynch. I know what he does, and he's probably going to pull the rug out from under us in a pretty extreme way. That was how I felt about it. It just gave me that feeling right off the bat, even though I was extremely emotional watching all of that happen as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what really made that feeling stronger for me, because I had that feeling as well, and I think a lot of people had, but the fact that Cooper's face from, well, basically I think he's in the Black Lodge, but that face superimposed over what's happening when that face appears, I think for me, and I'm probably not alone in this feeling, but for me that was a confirmation of some source that this is not happening, you know. This is
right.
Something here is wrong to the point that it's not even happening like we see it. And I don't know if I'm, you know, going out on another topic now, but if you read the final dossier that came out later, there's a lot of things that are wrong with that as well, as it were with in the case of the secret history of Twin Peaks. Of course, a lot of things were off and not correct, and ages and ages of people and places and situations that we knew from the original run that were described differently. But when you read Tamara Preston's account of what was happening at the sheriff's station, she I think she says or writes in the final dossier that she was there when it happened, like she was an eyewitness to the fight with Bob, and that's not true. I mean, it's not true considering what we are seeing in part 17, because they arrive after that fact. So
yeah,
right.
It's a lot of things that are off and wrong, and but the face that we see, the superimposed face of Agent Cooper, not to mention the fact that he is actually saying we're living inside a dream. We live inside a dream, I think he says. I mean, it's just for me, it's just a sign that what we are seeing is not it's not the reality at all.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is no truth, and I guess we should say right off the bat here that anyone coming to this podcast looking for you know, a clean, unambiguous breakdown of what goes on in this show is probably going to be disappointed, because that's not what we're going to do here. I don't personally believe that there is a you know, a quote unquote key to understanding the show. The reality of the show breaks down pretty heavily in these next couple of episodes, and it's just not, I mean, I don't, it doesn't matter what kind of theories you throw out there. You can always find holes in them, and you can always find inconsistencies, and there's always questions that you can raise. So, you know, we're going to do a little bit of theory crafting here probably, but, you know, we're not here to solve it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's one key to unlock all of the mysteries and the inconsistencies. And I think that anyone who looks for such a thing when going into something that David Lynch or Frost or both of them together made, I think will be disappointed. But some people seem to hate the return and Twin Peaks and stuff because of that. But then I think it's not for you. With all the respect, you know. But what I think I wouldn't like one solution. Actually, I would like to not have the solution as we do have no solution now, because I find it interesting to talk about it and to see, oh my God, did you interpret that in that way? I've never thought about before, because really good art, in my opinion, will make you think and make you ponder in eternity, more or less. And it's not, that feeling is not a bad feeling for me. It's the opposite. It's a good feeling because it kind of expands your mind in some way.
We should probably get into what actually happens in this episode now.
Okay.
So the first scene that we get here is basically a continuation of the Diane scene from the previous episode, where her tulpa is shot and killed and returns to the Red Room. We meet the Blue Rose Task Force here in their famous hotel room in Buckhorn, South Dakota. Right off the bat here, we get kind of a crude joke from Gordon, with Albert saying, "Oh, you've gone soft," and Cole responding, "Not where it counts, buddy." And of course, there's a quick cut, and we see Tammy sort of giving a little knowing look, perhaps, which I think probably is fuel to the fire for this idea that there's something going on between Cole and Tammy. At least that's how I read it. I don't love that, but I do think that that's what's being implied. Do you guys have an opinion about that?
That went over my head.
I have never thought of that in that way, but I agree with you that it annoys me a bit. In fact, I have to say that when reading The Secret History of Twin Peaks pre The Return, I got the feeling that Tammy was much more of a, independent and tough girl or woman,
Yep.
of course. It actually disappointed me a little bit to see her because she wasn't the one, the kind of. And I'm not blaming that on Christabel. I'm blaming it, if blaming at all, I'm blaming it on the screenplay, because I think she wasn't given the kind of respect maybe that she was deserved of. So back to, if you just look at the scenes where when they standing outside just met Cooper earlier in the season, or Mr. C, I should say, in prison or in jail, when the shot when Tammy is walking into some kind of restaurant, I think, and they're like commenting on her body and stuff. So no, not but not explicitly, but implying with their looks and their, I'm feeling much better now, and as Albert says and stuff. I feel it's a little bit much of that. I could do without that, actually.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also read the Secret History and was pretty disappointed with the way that Tammy ended up being portrayed. She's much more capable in the book, the way that Frost wrote her. She's much more assertive. She's a lot smarter.
Yeah. She
just seems a lot more attuned to what's going on, and ultimately in the show she ends up becoming more of a sidekick, and
that's a shame, because she could be a kick-ass detective, just like Albert, or maybe like Cooper, a new Cooper, not a substitute for Cooper, of course, but like a new fierce character that you could really identify with. She wasn't.
I totally agree. I think that they really missed an opportunity there, especially because Lynch takes a lot of grief sometimes for the way that women are depicted in his films, as we've discussed before, and I think that they really had an opportunity here to have a really strong and capable woman in a position of power in the show, and instead she's kind of like I said, relegated to sidekick status, and even objectified at times. And that's probably one of the only aspects of this season that I just like unambiguously don't like at all, is the way that Tammy was handled. So yeah, it's it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but the gist of the scene, the real meat of the scene here is that we get this reveal about Judy, that she is a quote-unquote extreme negative force. And I say she just because, Judy is a female name, but I think it's probably, I don't know that extreme negative forces, necessarily have a gender per se, but, and Gordon reveals that Major Briggs, rather, was the person who had discovered, the existence of Judy, and that he, Cole, and Cooper had put together a plan some time ago that would ultimately lead them to Judy. This is a pretty intense retcon from what had come before.
To say the least.
Yeah. I mean, we know from some behind-the-scenes gossip that Judy, as referenced by Jeffries in Firewalk with Me, was originally going to be Josie's sister,
right.
if I recall correctly, and they had this whole other plan for it, and now they've really changed it to not only do we know that Judy is not a person, we know that she is some sort of primordial evil, and not only that, but she is in a lot of ways, like you mentioned at the outset, Dylan, kind of the the secret villain of the show, and actually a big motivating force behind a lot of what happens with Agent Cooper in this season. And what we hear in this scene is actually going to inform a lot of the ways that people interpret what happens, not just in these next couple episodes, but with the show in general. And I just think it's interesting, this way in which this shadow narrative has been revealed. It's a little odd to get it this late in the game, but it's a pretty it's a pretty audacious move in a lot of ways, I gotta say.
Yeah, it really it leaves you wanting. It left me wanting to pause and then go watch the last 16 episodes again. Be like, wait, hold on, what did I miss? This is what's been happening the whole time. But yeah, it does really. The first thing I thought of was like, wait a second, you mean the Cooper from the original run? So did this happen off screen during season 2, or are we dealing with some unofficial version business here? But yeah, this does inform. I think this is almost like a primer. It's like, okay, this is relevant pieces of information that will make watching the next 2 hours at least somewhat have somewhat of a context. You know what I mean? Like, it'll give it some sort of a you maybe know what this invisible thing actually is, and it's called Judy, and these are the people who discovered it. 2 of them went missing, but yeah, the biggest thing that popped into my head was that retcon, or maybe just the insinuation that there was something happening behind the scenes that we just didn't have, we weren't shown at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's implied that it happened during the original run, maybe, and in that case, we are given information that is totally new to us, because we didn't see anything of that going on. As is the case, of course, with Doug. I mean, the brother of the Major. Doug Milford, a very small part in the original run, who turned up to be apparently a very important character. But there's a lot of debate about Judy and who is Judy, and I'm one of those people who are not thinking about Judy in the way of like, who is it? A lot of people think of Judy as Sarah Palmer, or Judy is the one who is possessing Sarah Palmer. I'm not one of those. I wrote about that a lot of things about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, actually.
Yeah, because it makes no sense that in the final dossier, Judy is described, or Judy or Judy with U, is described as it's not as a deity but as a species of these Sumerian Utuku demons. And if it's a big negative force, it's a huge negative force, I think that it doesn't have to be an individual. In my opinion, it's more like a feeling. Like it's what's the opposite of love? We are told this all through, especially season 2. The opposite of love isn't hate, but the opposite of love is fear.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I think that fear might be just about as closest, quote unquote, evil as you can get in the Twin Peaks universe, because fear is something that will prevent you from not only fight evil or bad forces outside of yourself, but also within yourself. As you can see, I would argue, as you can see, like when Cooper enters the Black Lodge in season 2, and in my opinion, he is not ready to do that, and his mind is too fearful. So in that way, he fails, and that's the argument I base that on, is more or less Hawk and the things that we are told during season 2, that if you enter the Black Lodge with imperfect courage, and that's the fear, I think, it will utterly annihilate your soul. So that's if that isn't a big negative, huge negative force, then I don't know what is.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
definitely.
I do like that interpretation, and I like what Joel Bacco, who's a great Twin Peaks writer and podcaster, has to say about the whole Judy phenomenon, which is that he basically believes that it's like a metaphor for trauma. And and I do believe, I don't believe that Sarah Palmer is Judy. Like, I don't think that that's what's happening at all, or that Judy is inhabiting her, or that Judy is limited to the body of Sarah Palmer at all necessarily. But I do think that I do think that Sarah is being influenced in some way by it.
I agree.
I think that she has been touched by Judy to a certain extent, and if for no other reason than, we learn all this stuff about Agent Cooper here at the beginning, and the fact that, he and Briggs were very intent on seeking out this negative force, and where do they end up at the end? They end up at the Palmer house.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so that's why I think that Sarah Palmer is associated with Judy in some way, but I don't think that she is Judy. And I think that, like, on a metaphorical level, Judy is sort of acting as the aftermath of everything that's happened to Sarah, with her daughter being murdered, and then the discovery that her husband is the murderer, and then his death. It just sort of like her collective trauma from that whole situation is manifested as this extreme negative force, as we call it. So I definitely wouldn't put such a literal stamp on it to say that Sarah Palmer is Judy, but I do believe that we're meant to think of her as being under the thumb of Judy in some sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. When Hawk comes to visit her at the Palmer house after the incident at the grocery store, I listened carefully to the sound that you can hear coming from, well, she says it's something in the kitchen.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw that. I put a video up where I tried to play that sound over and over a few times. And if you listen carefully, you can actually hear the electricity underneath that, the sound of the glasses or the bottles of whatever it is. There's that just humming noise underneath that. And I'm not sure what it means, but it could be like it might be just a sign that there's something going on at the Palmer house. I definitely think that you're right when you're saying I agree with you when you say that she's associated, or have been associated, like have been, influenced by this negative force. Absolutely. And it might be a portal there of some kind. I don't know. It's just we have a lot of portals in the Return that we didn't know about. The only portal that we really knew about was Glastonbury Grove from the original run. So, and here we see so many other examples of portals. So I don't think it's weird or strange if there should be some kind of, if not portal, that maybe some kind of slip through time and space or something that made it appear in her house, and she is like bound to the house in some way.
Something tells me we're not done talking about Judy just yet.
Yeah, I have thoughts, but I'm saving them.
Yeah, there's still...
I don't think we're not going to talk about Judy. Keep her out of it.
Just for a few minutes, like literally just a few minutes, we're not going to talk about Judy.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, so we also get some other information here in this scene. We learned that Cooper had told Cole that he says, quote, "If I disappear like the others, do everything you can to find me. I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone." Which we will remember was something that was said to him by the giant, aka the fireman, in the first episode. Pretty interesting. Do either of you guys have a take on what is meant by this two birds and one stone phrase here?
My gut is telling me that the two birds are Judy and Lara. That Cooper's goal, his intention, is to save Lara and find or destroy Judy, and that he's almost like using his. He's almost like, it's like a chess match. Like, he's trying to save Lara primarily, but he understands that Judy, whatever Judy is onto him, so he is trying to ensnare Judy with his original plan. That's my best shot at it. I think it is a very evocative statement, and obviously, since we're given that statement as part of the very, very first thing we see, shrouds it in significance for me. So then based on what we are left with at the very end of the finale, with Richard and Lara or Richard and Carrie at the Palmer house, you could potentially make the argument that was sort of his two birds with one stone, to get Lara and then to use Lara's scream to somehow knock the electricity out of this house. And whatever that means symbolically, you could say that it means he's destroying Judy, or that he is doing some other thing. But I definitely feel like it's a two-part plan, one that involves finding Lara but doesn't necessarily end there. And whether and I'm sure we'll talk in this episode and in the next episode about the nature of the finale and whether or not you can you interpret that as a success or a failure or what. But that's where my head went, is that if you're going to interpret it literally, you got one of the birds is finding and saving Lara, which is clearly his goal. That's what Leland asks him to do in part 2 or 1, and then the other one being to use Lara in some way to get at this other goal, which I would feel comfortable saying that it is to find Judy, because that's what Philip Jeffries says to Cooper. Like, this is where you'll find Judy.
I mean, it's what we're literally told, in this first scene here, and what's implied later in the sheriff's station when Cooper alludes to the fact that we're acting on information given to us by Major Briggs. You know what I mean? Right.
And he says the past dictates the future, which is two birds, one stone, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I tend to agree with you that my gut feeling or my thoughts are going in the same direction, but also I tend to be self-critical to my own way of thinking, and maybe it's more metaphorical. Maybe it's more like a, I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe he realizes in some way that he is. I think that Cooper realizes that he is in some way in over his head in some kind of way. You know, that I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone could also mean that regardless what he's referring to, it's like I'm doing all I can. You know, I'm not really. I'm not really
trying to
capable.
do too much, arguably.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not really capable of doing all that I want to do. So I'm in real danger of actually disappearing, just like the other ones.
There's a lot of information that gets revealed in the scene. It's one of the most explicit information dumps that we receive in the entire season. I mean, there's just so much going on here. We learn about Judy. We learn about this whole plan involving Cole, Cooper, and Briggs to find Judy. We also learned that, oh, by the way, Ray Monroe is an FBI informant. And then this scene ends with Gordon Cole receiving a phone call from the Las Vegas FBI. And Bushnell Mullins gives him a message from the person that he knows as Dougie, telling him, all this information that he's headed for Twin Peaks, and he mentions 253, the number of completion, etc. So that sends Gordon off to Twin Peaks.
Can I just add, so we don't miss this?
Sure.
I love when Bushnell Mullen is saying, "I'm his boss," and Gordon replies, "That makes two of us," you know.
I love that
just
too.
find that I was just laughing at I found it funny.
Yeah, and of course, Dougie is Cooper. How the hell is this?
Yeah.
That's a classic right there. So there's that scene, and before we head to Twin Peaks, just very briefly, we get our very last bit of Ben Horn. He gets a phone call from the police saying that they have found Jerry. He's naked, apparently, and ranting about how his binoculars killed someone.
In Wyoming, right?
Does he say that? I don't remember.
I think he does. He's far away from where he used to be. So,
okay.
In my opinion, he must have either find a portal or found a hitchhiking situation or something. But he's far away and he's naked. Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Without identification.
yeah. So yeah, this is it for Ben Horn. This is the last we see of Ben Horn in Twin Peaks, is him receiving this phone call about his brother. Shout out to Richard Beamer. I thought he was fantastic in this episode, or in this season rather. I liked some of the subtlety that was added to Ben Horn's character in the season. I thought that we saw some real growth and maturity, and I'm on record as being a big fan of his scenes with Beverly. I think they're very sweet, and I also of course love his monologue about his bike. So.
Yeah, the bike monologue is so fantastic. Also reminded me a lot of that scene when he's at the bottom in the original run, and he's just making silly hand gestures at that when he's watching the tapes from the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Or the film from the 50s, and laughing and just being nostalgic. And I think that the bike scene was a nod to that scene. So I agree. I found that pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've spoken a lot about how I really love Richard Beamer and enjoy the character of Ben Horn, so I won't say too much. But there's so many great actors in The Return. Actors and actresses, but I'd say Richard Beamer just technically is very high on the list. He has such a command of like when the camera is on him, I can't stop listening and looking. He just has an absolute like charisma about him, and I was really happy to see the character's growth in The Return, especially because of all the zany antics that he's up to in season 2, to see him really have just a. It wasn't. I would have enjoyed a bit more with him, but what we got, I think, was absolutely just perfect, and I like that we give these little farewells to these characters.
Let's head to Twin Peaks, where we see that Mr. C is on his way to Jack Rabbit's palace. He has these coordinates. He's eliminated the other 2 coordinates by sending Richard up to be vaporized by this trap of some sort. So he's got these coordinates that lead him to the Golden Pool. And this is the same place that we saw Naito show up, in the nude a few episodes ago. And he pretty much immediately gets sucked up into the portal. And we're all thinking, holy shit, what's going to happen when he gets to the fireman's house, which some people believe is the White Lodge. People believe they're one and the same. And as soon as you get there, in a hilarious bit of staging, his head is encased in a cage.
It's cooped. It's what it is.
He's
cooped.
Yes. He's literally cooped, and
he's in a coop.
Yeah, and Gisela, you pointed this out in your reaction video, but it kind of looks like he's engulfed by black fire.
I think he is. Yeah, there's black smoke all around his face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I never interpreted it that way, but I like looking at it now. I was like, that kind of makes a certain amount of sense. So yeah, he's in a cage, and to the right of the screen we see the giant floating head of Major Briggs.
I love him. I'm so sad that Don Davis wasn't alive for this season, but I think that I have to say they made a brilliant job working him into the plot without him being alive. So
yeah, we've talked about this before, but I just have so much respect for Lynch and Frost and the way that they would rather, like, they have such a firm vision for the way they want the story to go that they would rather replace actors with like symbols and objects and visual effects than rewrite the script. Like they had to have Major Briggs, so he's just a giant floating head. And he's a decapitated corpse. Yeah. They wanted to have Philip Jeffries, so he's, he's a giant steam machine thing. It's like, I love that. Is just so wonderful to me.
Yeah,
it's great. Too. Although it is sad that Don Davis wasn't around to do this season, because I'm sure that had he been alive, he would have been given an even juicier part to play.
Oh, I don't want to think about it, because it's a mind-blowing thought. What would happen if they had both David Bowie and Don Davis?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, Pete. Pete is one of my all-time favorite characters. I just love Pete.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let's not think about that, because I'm gonna cry or something. But yeah, I think they did a good job. And I also think I like the fact that some of the CGI effects are a bit corny or is a bit off, and it doesn't bother me in this context, if you know what I mean. It looks a little bit weird, just that head and that coop, and and I like that.
Yeah, the otherworldliness of it really, like, it was useful to me to, like, tell me how. I think it's like a telegraphing of how to watch a scene like this, because absolutely nothing is happening the way it does in your reality, the viewer. This whole thing is different. This is not meant to be viewed as like a thing happening in our reality. And so
exactly. I think so. The metaphysics is they are different.
Exactly.
In this reality, it's something else.
And it's the same as the Red Room. It's the same reason that the characters talk backwards and move in ways that seem very foreign to us, just because it's meant to. I love that the fireman's house has its own aesthetic, and it almost has like this cardboard cutout kind of stop motion feel to it, which I think it puts me in a place as a viewer. It gives me a different frame of reference, that one that I really appreciate, and we don't get it all the time. We don't get to go to the fireman's house all the time. So when we do, it's really weird, and I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I also like how there's a shot of just rows and rows of these electrical machines that we see before. It's the same machine that I think sounds the alarm to the giant in part 8.
Yep.
It is,
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's also the same machine that Naito touches in part 3, correct? Before she falls off into space.
Yeah, they're all similar. It's also the Jeffries, whether he is the machine or he is inside the machine. I think they're the same. Yeah.
Yep, totally. And I like this because it just confirms that Major Briggs and the firemen are in on this plan somehow to ensnare Mr. C and send him here to the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station for their own purposes. Based on what we've just heard Gordon say, it makes a certain amount of sense, as much sense as it can, I guess.
Yeah.
I think so, because he's like he's like shuffling through this on stage when Mr. C enters the cage. He wants to go to this place that we can see depicted on the stage or on the screen there, and that's the Palmer House.
Right, the Palmer House. Yeah.
But when the giant, he is levitating just like he did when he was creating the golden orb in part 8, and he's like swiping his hand, to shift the scenes and stuff.
He does an iPhone swipe.
Yeah, he does. Or a Tinder swipe or something.
Yeah,
he
exactly.
swipes left on Mr. C.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does.
Too bad.
Yeah, and I think very revealing the fact that we see the Palmer House here, because I think it suggests that this is where Mr. C wanted to go, even if he didn't know exactly that the Palmer House was the source of this evil. I think it shows that it's probably where he did end up wanting to go. We see the symbol on his card early in the season, which we think might correspond to Judy. There's some debate about that, but I just think it all fits in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, he outright asks Philip Jeffries, who is Judy or where is Judy? He's,
right.
Unambiguously, that's who or what he's looking for, and I agree. It's pretty significant that that's the bait, and then we see the switch, and it's really I do agree with you too, Nick, that I don't think that Mr. C knew exactly where he was trying to go, and I think in a lot of ways he is motivated by Bob.
Right.
So and that's evidenced to me by the fact that he seems confused when he's at the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station, but he just goes with it because he's not. Yeah. He doesn't have the agency to be like, oh, hold on a second, I was supposed to go actually. He's only a few streets away. You know what I mean? In theory, he's not. Twin Peaks ain't a big town.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree. Just because he says, "What is this?" It seems like he is disappointed in the result of his portal travel. But first, let me say that I'm not sure that Palmer House is actually his final destination. It might just be. We already discussed the fact that we kind of agree more or less that the Palmer House and Sarah Palmer inside of the Palmer House are associated with, not necessarily possessed by, but in my opinion, associated with this great power, negative force that is Judy, in a metaphorical way or other way. But it's not. What is to say that that's the final destination for Mr. C? We don't know. I'm open for the fact that it might be just another, stop at this journey towards finding whatever he wants to find. Maybe he wants to use Sarah Palmer to somehow get information on where to go next or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when
I don't think he necessarily knows exactly what he's looking for in a physical sense. I know that I feel that he's looking for this quote unquote extreme negative force, but I don't feel that he knows what form it's going to take. And I think that's why he asked Jeffries, like, who is Judy? Like, I don't think that he necessarily equates the name Judy with the force that he's looking for, and I don't necessarily think that he equates the Palmer house with what it is that he's looking for. Right. But I do think that the visual language that we see in this scene suggests that the Palmer house is the source of this power that he's looking for. You know, I just don't know why otherwise we would see first the Palmer house and then the swipe to somewhere else. It's like, this is where you want to go, but we're going to swipe on you and we're going to take you to where we want you to go. So, you know, it's obviously up for conjecture, but that's why I personally believe that his goal is the Palmer house, even if he doesn't necessarily know that it is. He just believes that going to these coordinates is going to lead him there somehow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Remember the fact that when Agent Cooper became 2, so to speak, in the last episode of season 2, it seems like the doppelganger has all of the original Cooper's memories. I think we have... Yeah, he does. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That's one of the points. But so I also think that he remembers that weird, strange situation in Philadelphia where Philip Jeffries appears but didn't appear, or whatever it is that Gordon says about that. But he mentions Judy in that conversation when he is suddenly at the FBI office in Philadelphia. So I think he has those memories, so he knows there's something about this Judy character. But I agree with you, Nick, that I don't think that I think he's more clueless, actually, about what Judy is or who. I think it sounds to me like he is considering Judy as an individual. Who is Judy? Who is Judy? And I think Philip Jeffries' answer is like, you already met Judy. So it doesn't imply that it's a person or if it's a metaphor for something else.
Mm-hmm. I think it's actually, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I think that Bob has a lot more to do with it than Mr. C does. Like, Mr. C doesn't seem to know who or what he's looking for or where he's trying to go. He's just simply motivated by his plan, and his plan is to find these coordinates and go where those coordinates will lead him. But he doesn't seem to, like Mr. C, based on what he's asking Philip Jeffries, doesn't seem to know or understand anything about Judy. And the only thing that we get from Judy, quote unquote Judy, directly, is that Judy wants to be with Bob again. That's sort of the only, whether you believe that was actually Judy pretending to be Philip Jeffries way back in part 2 or 3, but that's the only thing the show tells us. The show tells us that Judy and Bob are from the same origin, or at least Bob originated from the mother experiment thing, and that we see in part 8 that the woodsmen seem to be like they seem to be like shepherding Bob, not really Mr. C. Mr. C is like a vehicle for Bob, and we sort of, we see this later in this episode where they extract Bob from Mr. C. So Mr. C, the more I ponder and the more I've watched, he seems almost like he is simply a pawn, and like a sort of an like he's motivated by Bob, but Bob's motivations are not. Bob's motivations are singular, and it could be that Bob is trying to get back with Judy the way Judy is trying to get back with Bob, or the mother experiment or whatever, if you want to differentiate between the two. But I get the sense that Mr. C is more of a vehicle for Bob than we're shown. Like, I don't think that he has as much autonomy as it might seem, just based on where he ends up.
Mr. C, against his will, seemingly arrives at the Twin Peaks sheriff station, and he's a little confused by this, obviously, and he sees Andy, and Andy sees him, and Andy is just overcome with joy that Agent Cooper is back, and he wants to bring him inside to meet Frank Truman and all that. I don't know about you guys, but my anxiety level during this whole sequence here was very, very high.
Oh God,
like,
yeah.
Me too.
I like when he shows up at the sheriff's station, I'm just thinking, like, is this show gonna end with him just like mowing down everybody here, like
Exactly.
Andy and
Like,
Lucy
care
and Frank?
I actually think I said it out loud in one of my in the reaction video. I said, oh, "Please don't hurt Andy." Can I just put an anecdote in here, because when he is arriving at the sheriff's station, he's just, what is this? He says, what is this? And if you listen to that exact line that he says, what is this? It is the exact same audio as when he says, what is this, at when he arrives at the
the compound?
The farmer, what's it called?
The farm.
The farm. What is this, kindergarten? That's the exact same audio, by the way, but that's just an anecdote.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned from the behind the scenes footage here,
Shot.
take a drink. Yep, take a drink. Is that this scene right here of him approaching Andy, this is the very first scene that was shot with Mr. C, Kyle MacLachlan as Mr. C. And I think, honestly, it shows a little bit, because his hair and makeup situation is it's a little weird. It's a little off, in my opinion. Like, you can tell that they hadn't quite gotten it down yet. I don't know what it is. It's like his hair is a weird length. Like, his makeup is a little strange. I don't know. He still looks like Mr.
You have to give him a break. He's just been in the the White Lodge, cooped up and all smoky and stuff. No, I agree. And
yeah. This is also one of the only times we see him just like in broad daylight too.
True, yeah.
Like, we don't really see him like just in the direct sun like this usually. So that could have something to do with it, but it's not really relevant. But it just looked to me like they were still figuring out what to do with his hair and makeup, because I thought that he does look a little bit different here than he does during other parts of the season. And when you know that this is the first scene that they shot, it makes a certain amount of sense.
I think you're right, actually. Yeah, his hair looks a little bit fuller, maybe a little bit more shiny, and his face looks, and he also gives out a smile that doesn't quite fit. It could be acting in front of Andy, of course, like, hi Andy, but it seems a little bit too loving, that smile that he gives.
Yeah, his performance, I think, is also a little bit different here.
Yeah, that's what I noticed
throughout these scenes. Like, he seems a little bit more I don't know how to describe it. He seems a little bit more sinister to me.
Yeah, he's like supervillain.
He has more of a flat affect throughout throughout the rest of the season, rather. And it seems to me here like he's like, oh, I'm a bad guy now, aren't I? And like, he has the bad teeth and everything. Did you guys notice his teeth before this?
This time,
because like I never noticed prior to this episode that his teeth were all like brown and rotten.
Are they before this? Because I never noticed that they were, but this is the first episode where I noticed that. Me too. When he says "in the flesh," that's like the one time I think I noticed it.
Yeah, and when he says "hello, Andy," like, I noticed his teeth then, right?
I didn't, but he's not showing off a lot of teeth, is he? No, I didn't notice that. I have to watch that again, actually.
Yeah. Interesting. I think they were still figuring things out with Mr. C and his whole look at this point.
I don't think that Kyle MacLachlan is necessarily used to playing bad guys, maybe. So.
Oh, definitely not.
No.
This is the first one he's ever played, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was just maybe I'm not suggesting that he's bad in these sequence at all. I think he's still great, but he might just be still getting used to the skin of Mr. C, so to speak. So.
Sure, it would take me a lot of time to get used to it, so I can understand that.
Sure, yeah. So Andy takes him inside and takes him to meet Lucy, who's obviously very excited to see him. Doesn't seem to be anything strange to her about the fact that he looks like a complete creep. And also, Frank Truman comes out to meet him. They shake hands. And Mr. C follows Truman into his office, and Andy and Lucy sort of look at each other, smiling for a while, like, oh, isn't it great that, Agent Cooper finally showed up after all of these years? And then Andy has a memory from his vision of the fireman, which is of the future, of him going to place Lucy at the doorway so that she can shoot Mr. C.
Yeah.
Did
you notice that beforehand, before he gets that flashback? Did you notice the fact that Lucy is wearing the same sweater?
I did not. No,
that made my heart like I thought I was getting a heart attack. I mean, it's just oh my god, it's the same. Just as I said before, that your heart was racing when you were like, oh my god, anxiety level, 1,000, when Mr. C was arriving at the sheriff's station, and when they came inside and I saw Lewis's sweater, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, now everything will be a massacre, But I was just completely drenched, watching that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this whole thing was just like, oh boy, it's so tense.
Absolutely.
So yeah, as soon as Mr. C shows up here, Naito starts going nuts. Like, Naito is in the cell. She starts making her noises. She's kind of freaking out. She's like reaching around. She's obviously very upset by Mr. C's presence. And at this point, Chad takes his key out of his shoe and escapes from his prison cell. Andy goes down, and Chad points a gun at him. And at this point, I'm thinking, like, great. At first, I was worried that Andy was going to get killed by Mr. C, and now he's about to get killed by fucking Chad.
Right. Don't touch my Andy, you bastard. That was my thought. Exactly,
if my beloved Andy dies at the hands of Chad, then
I will never forgive you.
Then we know David Lynch truly does hate us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But this is Freddy's time to shine. So he punches his cell door open, which hits Chad and knocks him down long enough for him to be incapacitated, I guess. So Freddy saves the day in this instance, just as he's about to again in a few minutes here. So at this point, Mr. C and Frank Truman are meeting with each other. Andy offers Mr. C some coffee, which he declines.
That was, wasn't that absolutely confirmation that, like, oh no, that was bad. Everyone in here right now should be questioning, who is this guy? You know?
Andy should have shot him right then and known that he was an imposter.
The worst vibes imaginable. No thanks. I'm all right. Ugh.
Yeah.
In relation to Mr. Cooper, Agent Dale Cooper, it should be considered a crime to say no to coffee.
Yes, exactly. Agreed. So, Mr. C and Frank Truman have a very awkward little interaction here, where Frank Truman just has this look on his face like, who the fuck is this guy? This weird, creepy long hair sitting in front of me that everybody thinks is Agent Cooper. He obviously is in on the fact that at least that Hawk has a theory that there's two Coopers floating around. He saw the slip of paper that Major Briggs left with, Cooper. So he probably, his sensors are probably going off at this point. Like, this doesn't seem like the Cooper that I've heard about.
Right.
I think it's confirmed that he thinks this because he's saying Cooper two times.
Right.
Just like
yes.
they were discussing just days ago, I guess, him and Hawk, two Coopers. So I took that double Cooper pronunciation as confirmation that he was not sure of the situation, and he was definitely on his guard.
Yeah, absolutely. At this moment, he gets a call from Lucy, saying that there's a call that he very urgently needs to take. He hears Cooper's voice on the other line, which stops him dead in his tracks. And, Cooper says, I'm on my way to Twin Peaks. Is the coffee on? And Mr. C obviously has a sense of what has just happened here because he almost immediately reaches into his jacket, takes out his gun, does get a shot off on Frank, but he misses and apparently hits his hat because there's this ridiculously goofy effect.
It's so weird.
Of Frank Truman's hat doing a little bounce.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like a cartoon.
A cartoon or a bad Western or something.
Yeah, it's very funny. I don't know, like, it's very, very silly. So Mr. C goes to the ground, and at first we're thinking, oh, well, Truman was able to get a shot off on him, but he falls down, and behind him we see Lucy holding the gun, which is, again, just an utter shock. One of many, many shocking moments in this. I don't know, just to see Lucy in this situation is very jarring because, like, pretty much every context in which we've seen her to this point in the season has been very low stakes.
Right.
She's been largely played for laughs. Same with Andy. And it's just interesting in the way that, like, both she and Andy become major players in the way that all of this ultimately shakes out. It's kind of interesting.
After the fact, I'm not that in that, when I'm thinking about it after the fact, I'm not surprised considering, Lucy is one thing, but considering Andy and his role in season 2, during the end of it, he's just staring and staring and staring at that, the copy of the petroglyphs from the Owl Cave that they made, and he's just staring at it, and then he says something like Andy says, and you laugh and you don't think about it. Does the 4-H club have something to do with this? Ha ha ha! But this it turns out to be something important, and that's, I think, a nod to the role that Andy can play sometimes. That he is maybe unknowingly himself, but he is a bearer of knowledge that comes in handy when you least expect it. So I wasn't that surprised when it came to Andy that he was the one who was going to see the firemen to get all these clues, but Lucy, she was, the fact that Lucy saved the day was a bit of, I was cheering. It was amazing. I thought there's
something about Andy and Lucy where they're kind of like the only two characters I can think of that are like basically exactly the same as they were in the original run. You can make a case that Hawk is kind of the same, but Hawk in the return is a bit more stoic than he was originally, and there's something classic Twin Peaks about Andy and Lucy, or in not even classic Twin Peaks with reference to the show, with reference to the town, the place, the geography of Twin Peaks. They sort of exemplify that place that Agent Cooper fell in love with, where he says it's a place where, you know, people slow down for a yellow light instead of speed up. Andy and Lucy are kind of like the poster children for that, and we are given that in doses in The Return, because like Nick and I have often complained about, their scenes are just these like over the top hokey, just like song and dances of just like why are we watching this? Why are we watching Lucy be confused about cell phones? Like, why are we watching them argue about the color of a chair? Like, who cares?
I understand cellular phones now.
Right. Yeah. So like it makes sense to me thematically that in this sort of in this almost, I wouldn't call it a false reality, but almost in this like sort of non-starter of a resolution, that you know, in the, like a true storybook good conquers evil sense, they are kind of like the unsullied good characters that like I think the firemen, it seems to be, because we can assume that, or we can make an assumption based on what we've seen, that Andy's, like, this whole thing was the fireman's plan. The fireman gave Andy the vision of the future in which this happens, and Andy is sort of like, I don't know if you call him like a blank slate, or if he is, you know, purely innocent in a certain sense, so that he was able to receive that message without judging it, like in the sense that like Cooper can receive messages, but he's going to interpret them in some kind of way. He's going
to overwork the plans and stuff. Yes.
Andy's not, and Lucy isn't, and also Freddy's not. Freddy was another one who we don't really talk about as part of this plan, but he was obviously central to the whole plan. But he's just like he doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing necessarily. I mean, he doesn't know why he is supposed to be doing it. He just knows he had a dream and that he's following through with it, and that this glove itself is the proof. It works. So, in like you're saying, Gisela, in retrospect, I see how it makes sense that Andy and Lucy get this task. But the initial reaction to that, to seeing Mr. C fall and then Lucy standing there with the gun, it was totally jarring. Even though we got foreshadow of it, but I still didn't. I still reacted to it kind of with half of a surprise and half of a like, hell yeah, Lucy, you go. That was fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. So at this point, Andy starts to bring everybody from the jail up to this office here. Everybody except for the drunk man, notably, which to me suggests a theory that I kind of buy, which is that he doesn't really exist. He's like a figment of Chad's imagination or some sort.
Yeah, but can I just ask you, why do you think that he does this? Why do you think he brings it? He's like, everyone must go upstairs. But why?
Because he needs to bring Nido in.
Sure. But is that a part of the plan?
I mean, apparently, because Diane becomes a part of the plan later, right?
Sure.
Like
I'm just curious what you think about this, because no one told him to do that. He just seems to... It's his instinct, maybe, almost. Like he's bringing all of them up. Upstairs.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody needed to come up, but Nido seems to be the key part of this plan here. So everybody's up here, and the room starts to go dark again, and we immediately understand what's about to happen because we've seen it happen already in part 8, and that's that the woodsmen are going to show up and do their, I don't know, their ritual, whatever it is that they do to Mr. C.
It's shamanic earth magic. Yeah, is what I call it.
They're doing this thing. They're rubbing blood all over his face and his chest. And this time, instead of Bob just sort of popping out briefly and going back into Mr. C's body, the Bob ball, as I'll call it, emerges from Mr. C and starts going nuts. Now, it's worth asking, like, why did he come out this time when he didn't come out the other time? And my explanation for this is probably that this is the same moment that Cooper shows up.
Exactly.
And
that's my thought.
Seeing Cooper probably sets him off, like, oh shit, like, this isn't good.
Yeah,
like
right.
Cooper's here for me. Like,
yeah,
this
because
is
I
gonna be
think
my ass.
you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bob is fixated on Agent Cooper first until Freddy says,
yeah,
hello, it's my destiny, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Bob Ball, he starts attacking Cooper, and at this point, I totally thought, like, oh no, Bob is going to possess Cooper.
For real
Like,
this time, yeah.
Yeah, like, that's what I was going to say. Like, we just dispatched with this doppelganger, and now, like, the real actual Cooper is going to have the Bob Ball, and that's how this season is going to end, with Cooper being possessed by Bob. That's really what I thought was about to happen. But no, what happens is Cooper spots Freddy, apparently aware of the fireman's plan, and says, "Are you Freddy?" And Freddy's like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is my destiny." And
actually, he's like, "That's right, and this is my destiny."
Yes.
I just love his dialect. It's the best. Yeah.
Apologies, I failed to get the accent correct there.
It's so funny when he. Did you see? Just this is sidetracked again, but did you see the actor? He's got a YouTube, some kind of reel of all the dialects that he does, and it's just he's so talented. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that was how David Lynch found out about
it.
He saw this video.
It proves that something like that can land you in Twin Peaks. That's funny.
Yeah, David Lynch apparently just loves this guy, Jake Wardle, because I was watching an interview with him, and he said that, like, he and David Lynch had like an online correspondence because of this video, like, years before Twin Peaks ever happened. Like, David Lynch was just, like, a fanboy for this guy and all the accents he could do, and they would, like, talk on Skype and stuff like that.
Wow.
Like, years before Twin Peaks even happened.
That's funny. Wow,
yeah.
That's cool.
It is. It's pretty incredible.
And then he gets one of the key roles in the return. That's yeah.
Could you imagine, like, David Lynch just wants to be your friend and talk to you on Skype? It's pretty incredible.
I can't, but I wouldn't mind, you know.
Yeah.
I'm up for a season 4. Let's amazing. Just say that if you wanna.
Yeah, I'm also available, David Lynch, if you're listening.
I think most of us are.
Yeah.
We're all game.
Yep.
So boy, where to start with this? So Freddy has this quote unquote fight with the Bob Ball, and on paper this is all pretty absurd and ridiculous, but because David Lynch is just such a capable filmmaker, he makes the scene actually pretty terrifying. Like, we get that first person point of view shot from the Bob Ball that's just, like, going back and forth and, you know, accosting Freddy, and the sound that's playing, just this blaring, cacophonous, staticky sound with, like, Bob making his noises where he's, like, screaming at Freddy, and we hear him say his
growling and
he's like growling, and he says his catchphrase from the European Pilot, "I'll catch you with my death bag."
Yeah.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Which I thought was pretty clever. But yeah, this scene, I feel like, even though it is a little bit goofy as it is, I feel like in less capable hands, it could have been a lot worse. You know what I mean? Like, it actually manages to be pretty intense and frightening. I had trouble breathing physically, literally.
Yeah. I was so on my on the edge of my seat during that, because I mean, I agree with you. It could be horrendous to see it, but in the wrong hands, as you said. But I actually think it was kind of wow, because they took all of the faces and little snippets of video that they had with Frank Silva, who's been dead for more than 20 years, and they put together this horrifying, terrible, fight between him and an actor that is actually alive and could be directed,
Right.
I think they did it it looked very good, I think.
Yeah, I think if you took this as like a 4 or 5 minute short film, just in terms of like what it looks like, it's so cool. Like there's all this like spliced shots of Cooper where you'll get one of them direct and then one of them sort of like from like a lower perspective looking up with this like shining light behind him. Like, and the way it alternates between perspectives kind of very abruptly, and the way the camera is not still for really any part of this whole thing, but just as like a feat of filmmaking, this little fight scene here does manage to be it's so exceptionally well done, and it manages to be like, just in terms of how fight scenes go, it really does build tension.
This scene is very divisive, even amongst people who like the show generally. Not everybody was happy about the anticlimax that this represents, I suppose. And, let's be honest, it is pretty ridiculous what happens here.
Totally absurd.
The absurdity of Freddy, this character that we don't really know at all, that we've only really had like a couple of scenes with, just comes in and magically dispatches with Bob with his green glove. I know that it's always kind of a dubious position to say with regards to art, like, oh, well, it's supposed to be bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like,
right.
in this case, it's such an outrageous, absurd Deus Ex Machina. Like, it is just so far beyond absurdity that there has to be a reason for it. Like, Lynch and Frost aren't stupid. They know that we're going to see this and say, like, that was it. That's all it took to kill Bob.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, there has to be a purpose for it. And, you could inject some of these ideas, critiquing superhero culture, perhaps, or this idea of tidy resolutions and whatnot, and I think that's all totally valid. But you're right, Gisela. I think that this really is just setting us up for a pretty profound fall.
Yeah.
And this is really just the first part of it, because immediately after all this, and Bob is punched and he is turned to bits and all the shards float up into the ceiling, Cooper goes to Frank almost immediately and asks for the room key, the room 315 key from Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we get the great line from Rodney Mitchum, who says, "Oh, well, that's one for the grandkids."
Yeah.
I appreciate that, just breaking the tension a little bit.
Exactly, yeah, palate cleanser.
Like, we've just seen something incredibly intense, and it's like, okay, that was weird. So Cooper, he puts the owl cave ring on Mr. C. Mr. C's body disappears. He takes the room 315 key from Frank. And it's at this point that pretty much like everybody and their mother shows up to this room. Like, Bobby shows up, Cooper, Albert, Tammy, Candy, Mandy, and Sandy. They're all there, and it has this very like Wizard of Oz quality,
yes.
Like, and you were there, and you were there,
Exactly.
and you were there. Yeah. And they're all just sort of standing around very awkwardly.
Yes.
It's this moment that should feel triumphant, because the ultimate baddie of Twin Peaks, Bob, has just been vanquished, and Mr. C is dead and Cooper is back in Twin Peaks. And yet it has this very stilted, very unreal quality to it.
Especially since when Gordon shows up, Cooper just referenced him, and then he says, "Who is here right on time?" Yep. And everything is just perfect, and it's like a play. It's like the finale of this last scene of a drama, of a play, like a chamber play or something. Everyone is just lined up to. In 5 minutes, we're gonna get the applause from the audience, and that's why I feel it's so crazy, absurdly tying all of the knots together, and it's we as viewers, we know that no, wait a minute, we have more than one part left, and even if we don't know that, it gives us a feeling of what. This is really not, as I said, something's wrong here, We can just feel it. It's too cheesy. I think I said cheesy when I described it first time.
Yes.
It's too perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And at this point, Cooper sees Naito. And as soon as he sees her, we get this superimposed face over the entirety of the action. Now, this whole device here with the face, to me, is one of the most brilliant things in the entire Return. It is such a simple but effective way of distancing us from the reality of everything that is happening here. Like, it is just such an odd effect. And I think it's notable that the only times that we see this face disappear is when we're focused on Diane, right?
Right.
Like, we see the face, and then it disappears as Diane's face emerges from Naito, and then it disappears again when I believe it's when they kiss.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it actually doesn't it doesn't totally disappear on Diane's face. I watched this a couple of times this morning. It's very faintly there. You can just make out like his ear and his eyes, and then it disappears completely when they kiss.
Yeah.
Which was I just
think it's fascinating that the superimposition happens over everything except for Diane, who is going to be the only person to accompany Cooper on this insane, cosmic journey that they're about to go off on. Yep. I find that to be very notable, that she's the person who doesn't get this sort of this surrealistic touch applied to her.
Right.
I think it's worth pointing out. Cooper here tells Bobby that his father, Major Briggs, was well aware of what is going on here. And that information that Briggs had gathered brought them together with Gordon. And considering what we heard from Gordon earlier in this episode, I think we generally know what he's probably talking about, right?
Yeah.
With this hunt for Judy and all this sorts of things. So, yeah, this face, the superimposition here, it's really, really important. It's almost difficult to talk about because it's such a simple yet complex gesture. It's like, on one level, it's just a face, and it's just kind of an interesting compositional detail. When we see like Cooper within Cooper, and the red room within Cooper's head, and Diane within Cooper's head, it just brings to mind all sorts of intuitively based connotations. But also, I think what it's meant to signal to us ultimately is that what's happening here, this tidy resolution with Bob being killed and all our favorite characters suddenly showing up and Mr. C being dead, and would you look at that, Diane and Cooper are reunited and they're having this really romantic moment. It's just like a giant red flag to us that not only is this not happening, but it cannot be happening. Like
Right.
it is not what we're seeing is not in the realm of reality, and we are seeing Cooper in some sense observing all of this from somewhere beyond the narrative.
And not only that, I think he is looking straight into the camera, which breaks the fourth wall in some sense.
Yes,
Which
right.
is also another layer of red flaggery. You know, he is basically telling us directly through the character, of course, that this is something else going on here. This is something that you shouldn't trust what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I find it
100%.
notable that the superimposition is of a moment. You know, it's like Cooper sees Nido, and then we get the shot of him seeing Nido, and then that is what lingers. So I agree with everything you guys are saying, that this is meant to symbolize the I don't know, not realness of what we're seeing, if to put it uneloquently. But I wonder if this is somewhat of a if we're seeing two things happening at once. You know, I mean, if that was another point at which something like the timelines split, and because the superimposed face is silent throughout most of this until it says in slow motion, "We live inside a dream." So I don't know if that's meant to be interpreted as, like, if you go back in time, an alternate version of this scene just has Cooper witnessing Nido staring at her and saying, "We live inside a dream." But it was such a brilliant indicator that something was amiss. It was like staring into the uncanny valley. It's like none of this at all seems right or feels right. And this lingering face, this lingering shot of something that we have just seen at a really significant moment, like I'm sure we're all in the same boat, not totally sure about what to make of Diane, or what to make of Nido Diane, or what to make of her role in the curtain call, so to speak. But I definitely agree with the idea that there is some fourth wall breaking here, and that's consistent with what we've seen of the fireman, and how his whole like apparatus is basically a movie theater, and that the Red Room is
it's a stage.
Yeah, and so is the Red Room. It's a theatrical curtain that we see lifted at a certain point.
Yes, that's right.
And so there's, it's almost like there is this veil of, that we refer to as the fourth wall, and we're hinted at it being a veil, and that we have that veil sort of shattered by this superimposed face, that just sort of, the character is staring back at you, and it's like so consistent with what Twin Peaks is. It's like, in a traditional sense, the viewer is meant to watch the show and ask questions about it and be like, oh, I wonder who killed Laura Palmer. I wonder who did this and who did that, or what this means. And it's like for the first time, literally, it seems like the show is actually staring back at you and asking you something, like, who is this character? Who is that man there? Who do you think that is there, or whatever it is? Like, you get this, like, it's such an interesting touch to add to something that, even if it wasn't there, I think we would all have the same feelings about this scene, that it feels very Wizard of Oz, kind of like this sort of like fake out wrap up. But then to add this this element, I think the only other time we see a character's face superimposed is Ray Monroe's, when he is watching Mr. C in the ritual in part 8. I interpreted that to be like, we are seeing him and we're seeing what he is seeing. And that would lend itself to the idea that this, we're seeing Cooper watch this moment from, like Nick, like you said, outside the narrative. And I think it's really interesting that afterwards, when we get through with all this stuff, we only see Cooper surrounded by total blackness until he arrives at the Dutchman's, when he is walking with Gordon and Diane, and then when he meets Mike. There's just complete blackness. And it's seemingly like telling us this is completely outside of all of the stuff that we've seen.
Well, I have my take on it is, and has been, I think, pretty much since it aired, or maybe since I saw part 18, because it ends with, Laura Palmer whispering in his ear, and that, I think it's a similar shot that we see of him or his face as we see here, the superimposed face, which makes me think that this is happening. Well, let's say that part 17, or parts of this part 17, especially the scenes at the at the sheriff's station that we see here, is some kind of a wishful thinking that Cooper is doing after the fact, because we know that he ends up in the Black Lodge. It seems like he might be locked in the Black Lodge again, maybe. We don't know for sure, of course, but I see it as Cooper reliving what happened, but adding details to make it better, like wishful thinking. And if someone says something stupid or mean to you, and you just flabbergasted and you don't know what to say, then after the fact, and I should have said this, and I should have thought that, and I could have done this, a little bit like that he is adding details to the so to speak official story, or the unofficial story of what happened, and that could be the explanation for that we see the sheriff's station, all the things that happens there, that we all of us, all of the three of us, we find odd or out of place, or something's not right. And it could be because Cooper is imagining what he would have liked to have happened. That could be something. That's the thought that lingers with me, and I can't shake it. At least not until I find a better one to replace it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I do like the idea that this is sort of like him still trapped in the Red Room, because we will see in the next episode that in a seemingly different reality, he emerges from the curtains once again onto Glastonbury Grove. And I do like the idea that he's sort of, just sort of in contemplation, with this 1,000-yard haunted stare about what could have been, and dreading what he knows he has to do, which is in a lot of ways a real violation of who he is as a person. He's about to use two different women as pawns in this greater plan, while really putting them through various stages of trauma, sort of making Diane relive her rape in a certain way, and bringing Laura back to the scene of her abuse. I just, it's so rich. We could talk about it forever, but yeah. So, like you mentioned, at this point, we see the clock. It's 2:53, and the entire room goes black. And next thing we see is that absolutely iconic shot of Cooper and Diane and Gordon, walking side by side towards the camera in the complete darkness. And they show up, surprisingly, in what apparently is the basement of the Great Northern, where Cooper uses his room key, his 315 room key that he just got from Frank, to open this door. And within this door is the source of the hum that we have heard throughout. And he says goodbye to Diane and Gordon. He opens the door, he steps a foot inside, and he turns around and he looks directly at Diane and he says, "See you at the curtain call." Great stuff.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah, just I'm just gonna say, every single moment from this episode from here on out is just like, holy fucking shit. It's so good. Oh
with
my
sugar
God.
On top.
Yeah.
Oh my
goodness. It really does, like, for whatever this show does to you for like the first 16 episodes or maybe the first 15, where it is so like withholding, to be thrust into this space now, this complete blackness, to see that shot of Cooper, Diane, and Gordon walking down, and then just the drama of all of this, it had me on cloud nine, because like, you're not only is it awesome in and of itself, like, not only is it interesting and compelling, you've, at least I felt like as the viewer, that I earned this. I have waded through a seemingly endless stream of narratives that confused me, just to get to these moments right here where your things are coming together, but in a way that is so outside of my personal expectations that I was just thrilled. I was like, I couldn't have been happier, I don't think, watching these scenes, and like finally getting to see what these iconic characters are doing. And there's a real thrill in not knowing, for me. Like, there is like something really cool about the fact that these are very evocative characters that have been somewhat elusive to us, and now we are actually getting to see what the hell they were up to. And it's such a treat. And I'm just grateful for it, because at the end of the day, like, I watch this show because I love it, and I love it for moments like this that really make me go outside myself as the viewer, and relinquish my, like, my stranglehold on the narrative. Like, okay, if I can just like understand these few pieces, then this whole thing might make sense. It's really liberating for me to just let go of all that and see these extremely challenging characters in a black room, walking towards the unknown. And we're given, we have snippets. We've seen the boiler room area before. We've seen the 315 key before, but just
we heard the sound as well. We've heard it.
Yep, the hum, right.
Also when it was present when Agent Cooper finally woke up from the coma.
True.
Mm-hmm. Mike meets with Cooper here. They both sort of emerge from the darkness, which again I love, just cinematically. Both of them just stepping forth from just this complete and utter void. And Mike recites the Fire Walk With Me poem, which,
not backwards.
Again, chills. I love
yeah,
this.
exactly. I was having goosebumps.
It's so wonderfully dramatic, and we've got that hum is like really, really loud now on the score, and it just feels like we're about to step into just a whole other realm of existence here. So yeah, basically what they do is that they follow an almost identical trajectory to Mr. C as he walks through the Dutchman's. We get an identical shot of them walking down this long hallway with the forest superimposed. And we also get another shot of the jumping man, just as we did before. And it just made me think about what we talked about, Dylan, on our Part 15 episode. This question that is posed to Mr. C by Jeffries saying, "Oh, you are Cooper." It's to see Cooper take literally the exact same path that we just saw Mr. C here really just raises these questions again about, the division between Cooper and Mr. C, and how much Mr. C is there in Cooper and vice versa. And those types of questions are only going to be explored in greater detail in, the moments to come here, particularly in the finale.
Yeah, and also the one fact that I think is interesting to notice is the fact that when Mr. C went down the same or the similar or corridor, he had a woodsman beside him, like guiding him to where he was supposed to go. But Cooper has Mike, or as he is actually credited, Philip Gerard, which is interesting in itself. I think that he is credited as the vessel, the shoe salesman. I don't know if you've discussed this already at some point, but I think that's also pretty interesting. But instead of the shoe, it's like it's the same place, but there are different contexts and relations within that place for them. Almost, it's like depending on who is entering that place, the Dutchmans or whatever.
Yeah. So Mike leads Cooper through this path, like you mentioned, and they walk through the courtyard, which, as we know, is the same courtyard from Fire Walk With Me. This motel location that we see Leland at, where he almost has a sexual encounter with his daughter.
Yeah. But they do exit the courtyard on different spots. Did you notice that?
Is that right? No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I wrote about that too when I wrote an article that was called "The Motels of Twin Peaks" or something. I noticed that when they exit the, so to speak, room above the convenience store, or the picture from the wall of Flora Palmer's, the flower wallpaper space, when they exit to go outside to the courtyard to visit Philip Jeffries, not only are they, and when I say they, I of course reference first there's Mr. C with the woodsman, and the second time here in part 17 there's the Cooper with Mike or Philip Gerard. The first time they exit a little bit more to the left and they go straight down to room number 8, where they meet the Bossomy lady, that weird, strange, back-talking character that we see there. And when Mr. C at that point meets Jeffries, I get a feeling that he's not in the same room as Jeffries. He's seeing him, visualizing him through the wall in some kind of way, The wall is opening up almost.
Right. Yeah. I never really paid much attention to that until this most recent rewatch, but you're right. Mr. C, he enters that room, and then it's like there's a weird effect where it looks like the wall sort of opens up. It
slides from one side to the other. Yeah, it does. And
it's very curious.
And not only that, it stays superimposed more or less during their conversation. As Cooper and Mike enters the courtyard, not only are they entering at a slightly different angle, but they don't walk to room 8. They take a straight right and go through a small corridor, and that's the same. That is the same small narrow corridor as where Leland enters in Fire Walk With Me, and he then turns to his right, and he is facing the room where Ronette and Laura is seated on the bed. So that's the corridor where Cooper and Mike is going through to the other side, and then they turn left again, and they actually enter the, as it seems to me in a way, the same room as Philip Jeffries. There are no wall opening. There's nothing superimposed. In my opinion, it looks like they actually get to meet him in person or in a machine, or how do you say, you know?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, I don't have an answer to why this is, but I think it's pretty interesting to see that, actually Mr. C is not actually in the same room as Jeffries. He's like seeing him as a projectory on the wall or beneath the wall in some way, and Mr. C is led there by the fire, but by the woodsman. So I'm not sure what's happening there actually. But if you look closely and you compare the two, you can see pretty clearly that not only are they taking different paths to the place where they meet Jeffries, but also they seem to end up in different rooms, and they exit at different spots at the courtyard. It's pretty. It might mean nothing. It might be just me spending hours and hours writing about this, but I have to say I find it quite interesting, and yeah, it's something to think about maybe.
Yeah, no, I definitely noticed the wall that you described that opens up for Mr. C, but I never really took note of the fact that Cooper and Mike don't experience the same thing. Yeah, that is kind of interesting. The idea that Mr. C isn't actually taking direct audience with Philip Jeffries. But yeah, so regardless, Cooper shows up here in front of Jeffries, he and Mike, and Cooper immediately asks for February 23rd, 1989, which, as we know, is the night of Laura's murder. And Jeffries says some pretty interesting things here. He says, "It's slippery in here. Say hello to Gordon if you see him. He'll remember the unofficial version." And he also says, "This is where you'll find Judy."
And also, I think he says something interesting about there might be someone. Did you ask me this or something?
Yeah. Really, I was about to mention that. Stuff. Yeah, that's exactly what he says. He says there may be someone, and then it's like a pause, and then he says, "Did you ask me this?"
It's like he's
confused
it's just something, or something.
Yeah, it's just exactly. It's something that we've talked about a lot, which is that Jeffries, in our opinion, is not really reliable. He's not of a sound mind. He's sort of stuck somewhere between space and time. Like he's not really physically there, and he's not really mentally there. He exists in some sort of nether realm that we don't quite understand. At least that's the way I read it, because
me too.
It really seems like he's getting his Cooper and his Mr. C mixed up, doesn't it?
Yes, I think so. And also, if you watch Fire Walk with Me, it seems like it's really traumatic to travel between space and time in the way that he does. You don't really get to see the scenes when he exits. If you don't see the missing pieces, of course. But when he exits this weird transaction that he makes to Philadelphia, when he exits it's in Buenos Aires. Right. Yeah, that's right. And he's screaming and bleeding and is smoking, and it's sooty behind him and stuff. It seems really traumatic, and it wouldn't be weird to assume that if you're stuck in time and space, like I also think he is, it would be confusing in many ways.
Yeah, and I think Cooper, or a lot of characters in this episode, keep referencing memory. You know, Philip Jeffries says it at the end of this. Like, Cooper asks Diane, "Do you remember?" So memory is massive, and it seems like Cooper himself doesn't realize a lot of things until he is given some sort of visual cue. Like he seemingly doesn't, like he I'm sure he sees Nido before, or maybe doesn't recognize her in the room, but as soon as he looks at her, that's when he makes this expression of realization, like he remembers something, and that triggers this whole superimposition thing. So it seems as if it's characters who end up in this state often have issues with their memory. So it would be consistent with that Philip Jeffries, the entity, if he's simply relying on memory, is going to be confused because he has interacted with Cooper before on some level, and like he's saying, his memory is certainly not linear like ours would be. Like I can remember, I remember this and I remember that, and I know that one happened after the other. So for these characters like Philip Jeffries and like Cooper, because as we keep seeing, so much of what he's doing is based on his ability to remember things. Yeah.
And also when he met... sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was thinking, when you said that, I was thinking about also when he met Mr. C the first time at the Dutchman's. It seems to me that Philip Jeffries almost wanted to test Mr. C to see if it's Cooper. Are you really Cooper? So he was asking something, and Cooper was Mr. C was then able to, because the doppelganger inherited the memories from the host, and he was then able to reference the incident in Philadelphia. And then he said, you are Cooper. Okay, now I know that you are Cooper. But then it seems when he is meeting in part 17, Mr. C. Sorry, I get them mixed up. I'm having trouble remembering who's who. But when he is meeting Cooper in part 17, it's like he's confused. Did I really meet him, or was that something else, or whatever? So the memory is really mixed up for a lot of characters, and also, as I mentioned before, with Tammy, when we read about the memories that Tammy has from the sheriff's station, she obviously get this mixed up as well.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much everybody at this point in the show is operating at some level of confusion or another.
Including
Cooper thinks
the viewers.
Yes. Cooper thinks he has a handle on what's going on, but as we learn, he probably does not. So, yeah, Cooper, he asks for the night of Laura's murder, at which point Jeffries spouts the owl cave symbol out of steam, which then transforms into an infinity symbol. And what we see is a black dot appear on the symbol and then sort of move throughout it, almost as if he is I don't know, sort of navigating some time loop here to get to the exact right date. I don't know. What do you guys think about this whole infinity thing?
I was initially wicked confused by it, but I think I actually have a kind of a handle on it now. So it starts with obviously starts with the owl cave symbol and then turns into the 8 or the infinity symbol. But then once the black dot appears, I believe it moves over from the right side to the left side, and then but it's in the same position, just like a mirror image. Then it flips over. Oh, I'm sorry. It flips first, putting it on the other side, and then it moves over back to its original position. And to me, I was reading that as if it's like a back door now. You know what I mean? It's since you have reversed this image and then moved it back over, it is you're entering into this part from the past. If at least that's right. Sort of how I looked at it, and based on what actually happens, he does enter into that. He enters into that timeline and interacts with it, which changes it fundamentally. But I think that might be the significance of the black and white too, that he is sort of entering into it from this other side, and once he interacts with that side, it totally changes.
Yeah. So the object, the dot, it stops on the infinity symbol here, At which point Mike says electricity, and Cooper is transported back into Firewalk with Me.
Oh my god.
This was...
That's all I have to say. I don't know. I was just...
yeah.
When that happened, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
you know?
I think based on your reaction video, I think you were kind of just like, as soon as you realized what was happening, you were just kind of like speechless.
Yes, and that's, I mean, I speak a lot, so that's I talk all the time, so
yeah.
then it might get you a hint of what it meant in my mind right then and there. So yeah, but that was just amazing, because it was like, what the hell is going on, you know? I don't think that anyone could see that coming. Maybe someone, but it was just a
definitely
big
not
surprise.
in this way. Definitely not them literally inserting Cooper into Firewalk with Me.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, right.
How insane is that? I mean, once I realized what was happening here, first of all, I immediately thought he's gonna try to save her. Like, just like, why else would he come back, right?
Right. Yeah.
And once all these puzzle pieces started to align in my mind, it was like, I don't know, I transcended to another plane of existence. I just, like, it was like out of body. Like, I just couldn't believe what was happening. It was just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
In the best possible way.
To me, once Laura sees Cooper and she screams, holy shit, man, because that happened.
Yeah.
She just looks off beyond James in Firewalk with Me and screams. And you are left with that, you know what I mean, in the moment, as just like, well, this is just Laura acting erratically. And I thought that was just brilliant, how that recontextualizes everything. I think it's actually kind of fascinating that maybe we're to believe that Cooper did this already, you know. He did it one time, and then through one way or another, he didn't save Laura, because if she, you know, just judging by like in Firewalk with Me, where the ending happens completely differently than it does in part 17, she still has that reaction. So we can assume that she still saw Cooper, this guy from her dream. But he didn't interact with her for whatever reason on this timeline, and that's what led to her death. But not only the decision to do that, but the insertion of this character, this different Cooper than the one we understand or the one we understood from the original run in Firewalk with Me, inserting that character into Firewalk with Me in a way that is consistent with the original film was just so masterful. So like such a there are a lot of things in this season that made my jaw drop, but I don't know, I geek out about that kind of stuff. Like I really like I really like when stuff like that happens, you know what I mean, when it happens well, and this just totally spellbound me.
If this was a podcast in Swedish, I could probably try to tell you what I thought about it, but I'm not sure that I could describe it in any, you know, human language with words other than guttural screams and stuff like that. But it was the most clever, just wow. When I saw that, I'm not sure. Do they have any idea what they do to us? Seriously, because for me, as I told you in the beginning of this, I told you that I started off watching Firewalk with Me, and I've seen it maybe like 80 times or something. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but to then see something new and new material coming out, and in this new material she is screaming because of Cooper. I mean, do they know what they can potentially do to us? because if they did, I mean, it's masterful. It's really, wow. It's one of the most amazing things that I saw during the whole run of The Return. I don't have words for it. Like, what I felt.
It's one of the most incredible things I think I've ever seen, to be honest. I know we're just going off on a very hyperbolic tangent here, but I really want to insist, like, this is such a bold, outrageous move, and as we've discussed, Dylan, throughout the season, the way in which this season continually referenced and enriched Firewalk with Me is, I think, one of its most unique legacies. The fact that it was able to take this film from 25 years prior that everybody hated at the time, and just imbue it with all of this significance that it didn't really have before. I mean, it was always a great film, and the way that it humanizes Laura Palmer was always very moving, etc. But just for it to have this little bit of meat on the bone is just really remarkable. I can't think of anything else like it.
Me neither.
And I actually feel more sorry for the people who watched The Return for the first time without having seen Firewalk with Me than for myself watching Firewalk with Me first of everything that I saw. So that's always a bonus, right?
It's impossible for me to imagine what this show would play like to somebody who not only had seen the original run and Firewalk with Me, but like wasn't like intimately familiar with them. Like, because the show is just so, it just plumbs the mythology so thoroughly, and it's just like, oh man, it's very inaccessible in a lot of ways to outsiders, but for those of us on the inside, it is just endlessly rewarding, and I love that about it.
I have a friend that didn't watch Firewalk with Me, and she actually liked The Return a lot, and she wanted to discuss it with me, and I realized that she didn't watch Firewalk with Me, so I was like, you say you like this, but you actually missed like so much. You really have. Why did you? Oh, I was almost upset, and she said, no, I saw I didn't get a lot of good reviews and stuff. What the hell are you talking about? You have to see it. And I was almost angry with her, so you don't.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Did she know that James was the same guy who showed up in the Roadhouse singing that song on stage?
I mean, I'm not sure. A lot of things just went over her head, and she still liked The Return, which is impressive. Yeah. But I pretty much forced her. I had like thoughts of doing like in the Clockwork Orange, like putting her and strapping her to a seat and forcing her eyes open. See, I will do that to you if you don't watch it voluntarily. But I didn't. Of course, but I was very upset.
If you're in for 18 hours of The Return, like take the 2 hours and watch Firewalk with Me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So like
it's just. It's necessary.
But I felt really horrible because of the level of angriness that I felt. And I think it tells me more. It tells everyone more about me than about her, maybe. Yeah.
That is pretty funny. So yeah, the other thing that I really love about this is the fact that it's in black and white, and that the music has been removed. Mm-hmm. These scenes here with Laura and James just have a totally different feeling without color and without music. It's almost like a memory, right? Where it's like you're recalling these things that happened, but because of like the fog of time, it's like the events just have a totally different quality to them. You know what I'm saying? It's really fascinating.
Yeah. It almost leaves you with that uncanny valley feeling of like, this is like 99.5% what I remember, and then there's something just a little off about it. And I think it's also a great move to like, I think you can contrast it with when you see the pilot like recapitulated later on, and that I do believe has the music to it, and it has that had a little bit more of like a fourth wall breaking thing to me, where you see Josie in the mirror and you see Pete go fishing, and that one was more of like, this is the changing of this show, whereas Cooper going back, like, no, he was actually just going back to the events that we, the viewer, had depicted to us in Fire Walk With Me. But this isn't Fire Walk With Me. This is February 23rd, 1989, through this this lens of, like you said, like a memory, almost like Cooper's memory, which is very fascinating because he wasn't supposed to be there, but apparently he was the whole time. Just it works in so many levels.
So yeah, the scene basically plays out exactly the same way it does in Fire Walk With Me, including, interestingly to me, Laura's line here where she says, "Bobby killed a guy." Yeah. Which is just, they could have edited this however they wanted to, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about the fact that they chose to leave that in there, like that reminder that, hey, Bobby, the guy that you just saw at the sheriff's station, this upstanding young man, etc. It's like we still remember what happened here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that they put it in, because if you think about what I said a long time ago, you have to assume that everything is how it's supposed to be, because they could do whatever they wanted. And they put that in, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because all this stuff isn't really relevant. Like her, flipping James the bird and all that sort of, like, even Donna doesn't know me, all that sort of stuff. It's not really relevant. They didn't have to include all of that, but I appreciate the fact that they did. So, yeah, as we know, Laura, she rides off with James, and then she gets off his bike, and she runs off into the woods by herself, and James drives off. Now, we get the shot that really took me by surprise, which is of Leo with Jacques Renault and Ronette just sort of sitting by waiting for Laura to show up. Just to see Leo's face in this moment was so jarring.
I know, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, I had to actually rewind it. I was like, wait, that was Leo. That was Leo and Ronette.
Yeah, and this shot I don't think actually exists before.
I don't remember it.
Like, I don't think it's
yeah,
in
it does,
the movie.
But
it does.
It's a short. It's not it feels much longer in part 17, but in Fire Walk With Me, I think it's basically Laura Palmer crawling out of the woods after being not dropped off by James, but more or less throwing herself off the bike. Mm-hmm. And then she walks through the forest to the cabin, and that's where you can see that scene, but it's really short, so now it feels much longer at this time.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I just don't remember like us really having this moment of them just all standing there together waiting in this way. Like,
no, because
it just seemed a little.
I think it's because in Fire Walk With Me you don't get the sense that they're waiting. It's just a meetup, so
right.
It feels much longer. Maybe they had more material and they put more of it in this time. Something.
That's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, maybe they had some stuff left on the cutting room floor that they added to make it look like they were just sitting around waiting and she never showed up.
Yeah, because they were all watching, they're all looking in the same direction. Like, we know she's gonna appear from that bush over there, So it's a little bit weird, but yeah, it definitely seems like they are waiting for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so yeah, Laura, she walks through the woods and she sees Cooper, and apparently through a combination of makeup and digital effects, Sheryl Lee is made to look much younger. The effect is okay, I guess. Like, I guess, you know, they kind of had to do it. They couldn't just have Sheryl Lee as she appears now walking through the woods, probably. That would have been a little bit distracting. But yeah, you can definitely notice that there's some special effects trickery going on with her look here, for sure.
I think it was really well done. I think I said in my reaction video that I thought it was another actor.
Oh yeah,
but
I seem to remember that.
I think it's a scene in the extras from the Blu-ray, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Where she's entering Lynch's trailer, and he's like, "Wow,"
that's the,
you know.
Yeah, that's the very first scene from the behind the scenes stuff. Is Lynch is waiting in the trailer at night, and they're about to film this scene, and Sheryl Lee, she walks in just in her full Laura Palmer gear, and Lynch is just like, "Wow."
Yeah, and I'm like, "Wow."
Like, he's just,
as a viewer, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and Cooper is Kyle MacLachlan is there. I think you don't actually see him, or like you see him very briefly. He's off screen, but you can hear him. And Lynch is like, "That's Special Agent Dale Cooper, man."
Yeah, that's right.
That's Special Agent Dale Cooper. And but he's just like, he's like in awe of just seeing Sheryl Lee.
That was epic.
Dressed as Laura.
I think that was an epic part of the extras. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was a great way to start all that stuff off. You can take another drink, by the way. Yeah, so she sees Cooper, and at first she doesn't recognize him. She says, "Do I know you?" But then she remembers the shared dream that they had, the quote-unquote dream of them together in the Red Room. And Cooper takes her by the hand here, and as soon as he does, we get a flash to the beach from the pilot. We see Laura's body wrapped in plastic on the beach. There's a beat where the camera just holds on it for a second, and the body flickers out of existence.
I lost it at this point.
Yeah.
I just broke down in tears.
I will fully admit that I did as well.
It's nothing to be ashamed of. We all cried, I think.
I was, because like they've got Laura's theme going too.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, and it's just starting to build up.
It's peaking. It's peaking.
Yeah, and it hits the climax right as he says, "We're going home," and oh god, it's so good.
I'm almost crying just thinking about it. It's
so good.
I have goosebumps right now. I'm just thinking about it. It was just what the hell. This is I think I declared, if I didn't say it out loud, I thought to myself that I declared Lynch and Frost the humongous, biggest geniuses ever. It was just amazing for me, but just but at the same time, with this really eerie feeling in the back of my head all the time, like, oh no.
Yeah,
I had the same thing.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. I still feel, and it's amazing, like, even knowing what comes next, I still feel the same way when I watch this. Like, it's, I don't know, it's trickery, it's voodoo. I don't know how they did that.
It is. It's magical. I have no better word for it than it's magic in some kind of real form.
It is. My brain was melting at this point. So we see her body disappear, and we go back to Cooper and Laura, and like you said, it shifts from black and white to color, and he says, "We're going home." Now, if you think about it for longer than 2 seconds, you immediately realize that, wait, home is not a good place for her to be.
No, it isn't.
Home is where Leland is.
Yeah, and
home is where Bob is.
Especially since when we got back to the Fire Walk with Me scenes in this part 17, one of the things that were included that is also in Fire Walk with Me, of course, is, I would say, the scariest shot of Leland that I know of ever.
Right, through the window.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it's been the stuff of nightmare for me since I was 15 or something, 14, 15. So, especially considering the fact that they included that one, and then hearing we're going home, you know, it's not a good idea. No.
The only saving grace may be if perhaps he was referring to home as the fireman's house, because that is actually where we see Laura originate from, or at least maybe.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I believe he's referring to.
Yeah, but because we also see, that's true, because I think we see a short scene from a shot from the portal by Jack Rabbit's palace, don't we?
Yes,
I think we do. Yeah, it's
okay. Yeah. That's exactly where I think he's leading
he's
her.
walking. He's walking with her. He's leading her. Maybe
right.
It's the right word for it. He's leading her through the forest, and then we get this shot of the portal by Jack Rabbit's palace. So it's maybe implied that he's taking her there. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I believe. Yeah. I believe that he's trying to take her to Jack Rabbit's palace. And I mean, this terminology, calling it home, I guess tracks when you remember the fact that Laura supposedly originated here as a golden orb, right? So that's probably what he's referring to. Like, this is where this is your original start point. But yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
Starting position, much more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, So at this point, the insanity is not nearly over, because we go back to the very beginning of the pilot, and we see Josie, another face that I did not expect to see, in the mirror. That amazing shot of her putting on her makeup.
Yeah, talk about starting positions. This is the first scene from Twin Peaks ever. The first person that we see ever in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it's literally the very beginning of the pilot.
Yes.
And then we move and we see Pete.
Which made me very happy, of course.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And also the episode is dedicated to Jack Nance, which I thought was very nice. He tells Catherine that he's going fishing, and then he goes outside and he goes fishing.
I know.
What?
Yeah. He got to
What?
go fishing, man. That was the one thing that came out of all of this.
We saw Pete go fishing. What?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
flabbergasted.
Before he even gets to the pier or wherever it is, where it's a bit of some kind of a plateau where he's. I think that's a new shot, actually.
Yeah,
but it's really well done,
a
because it
double,
looks exactly like it could be Pete with all the clothes right, and maybe the body language is a weeny bit off, but just a wee bit off, maybe. But
sure,
he's standing there and he's fishing. But just before that, before he even gets to that point, he is walking, and he is not saying. You don't hear the mill blow, you know, and he is not saying the lonely foghorn blows or whatever it is he says. And but what's most important, of course, is that you look beside him and you see in the background, you see that big log on the rocky beach, and you don't see Laura Palmer. And that's... I when I saw that, I had already lost it a few times, so I couldn't lose it again, but I was pretty much losing it again. Like, what? No, this is not real. This wow, why? This, how can they do this? This is a genius move, you know? But also at the same time, no, it's gonna be such a bad thing coming out of it.
Yeah, it didn't feel good, even though it was interesting and fascinating. It didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel like this was something that should be done, which I find interesting because it is seemingly what Dale Cooper meant to do, and we're sort of left to ponder why. But maybe that's more of a thing for the finale.
No, there is a sense of loss here at the same time, because it's like, well, the entire chronology of Twin Peaks is being erased in a certain sense. And so as an audience member and as fans of the show, we're left with these conflicted feelings of, oh my God, isn't it amazing that, you know, our hero Agent Cooper saved the poor girl Laura Palmer, but at the same time it's like, well, we kind of need Laura Palmer to be dead for this show to exist, which is a tension that is going to become get really rubbed in our faces, I think, in the finale, and I think it's a really, really fascinating one.
Not only that, for me the most important thing is, and this is why I have to say that I feel like, I mean, I love Agent Cooper, I love the character, but frankly, he's being a douchebag right now. And the reason I say that is because not only wouldn't we have the series and all that, but more importantly, Laura chose to die because she was possessed by Bob. Otherwise, she would have been possessed by Bob, and she chose to take the ring. And I mean, in Fire Walk with Me, Agent Cooper tried to convince Laura not to take the ring. So even back then, he was like propagating for her to not make her own decision in some kind of way. What to do about with her situation that she was in, because she was already in this situation. She was being stalked by, victimized by Bob, who wanted nothing less or nothing more but to possess her for real, use her as a vessel, because Leland was, so to speak, getting full of holes, as he says himself when he's dying. And Laura chose to die instead of letting Bob get her. And what does Agent Cooper do with this? Now, what happens to Laura now? You know? So, and what happens to Bob? So, in some way, you can say that he is actively working against Laura Palmer's own wish. And as I said before, he could have chosen to go back in time even longer. If he wanted to save Laura, he could have, I don't know, I have no good suggestion in a practical way, but he could have gone back in time and killed Bob in some way before he even got to Leland or something, you know?
Right, gone back to Pearl Lakes and stopped the whole thing from happening.
Instead, he goes back to the day of the murder, the night of the murder, where she's already pretty... She wrote in her diary that tonight's the night that I die, you know? So, he's a douchebag. And I love him, but he's a douchebag, you know? What was the purpose of all this? Was it for him or was it for her? He didn't save her.
I mean, I wrote here in my notes for this part, it says Cooper, quote unquote saves Laura,
right,
in quotes. You know, like, it becomes pretty clear that Cooper here is not operating in the best interests of Laura.
No.
He is using her completely as a pawn. And I think that that's evidenced by his demeanor here. You know, he's very stoic. He's not at all... He doesn't even seem to have any feeling about it whatsoever. Like, this is just one step on the journey to his ultimate goal. Like, he is not a comforting presence to her whatsoever. He literally just takes her by the hand and says, we're going home, which, you know, if you remove Laura's theme and all the pomp and circumstance surrounding this moment, it's a pretty chilling sequence.
Yes.
You know, he knows ultimately that he's going to lead her back to the site of her trauma and potentially re-traumatize her all over again. You know, he is not acting in a way that we would at all recognize as being Cooper-like, you know?
Yeah.
No, he's acting more like Richard in this moment. More of that kind of like dead-faced, matter-of-fact version of Cooper.
Yes.
And I would definitely agree that he's not acting in Laura's best interest. And I don't know that the goal was even to save Laura for the sake of saving Laura. I think the whole point was always like for him that investigation ended in episode 7 of season 2. But this definitely seems to be like you said, Nick, that he is using Laura, saving her, quote unquote, as part of this greater plan to ensnare Judy into some sort of plan or like second phase of this plan. Whether or not Laura is a willing participant, the Laura we see on screen doesn't seem to be. Whether or not the Laura in the Red Room is, I don't really know. But I would definitely agree that these actions do absolutely nothing to save Laura Palmer from the trauma that she experienced. That wasn't the motivation at all. And it's pretty clear, like you said, by the demeanor of Cooper and also by what happens next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see the parallels to the King Arthur legend, I think, and the knight and chivalry, the themes of those kind of things as well. Not only is Tamara Preston writing in the final dossier that Agent Cooper has this white knight syndrome, but even without that, it's pretty clear to me that he considers himself to be some kind of a hero, or he wants to be. Maybe making up for lost time when he was stuck in the Black Lodge, I don't know. But, you know, to the point that he's not considering he's not considering what would this person actually want to do. He's not asking her,
right.
And he's more doing it for himself than something else, in my opinion.
Yeah, he considers himself above the fray. It seems to me like he is no longer acting as a human being. He's acting more as like we've spoken about before on this podcast, as someone akin to, you know, someone like Mike or the fireman, like a lodge spirit who has concerns greater than those of mortal humans. And I think that that's a really startling realization here, because he ultimately has very little regard for Laura's well-being, as much as it may seem so in this moment.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So yeah. Yes, exactly. So we cut briefly back to the Palmer house, where it would seem that Laura being rescued has made Sarah, and potentially whatever entity is influencing Sarah, incredibly upset. We get a long shot where all we hear is Sarah off in the distance somewhere, just absolutely wailing. And there's a moment where she comes in she grabs the famous prom photo of Laura and just starts stabbing it with a bottle. And we hear this very intense, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a whooshing sound. It's like
an ominous one?
It's an ominous whoosh. It's an ominous whoosh. There we go. And she just keeps repeatedly stabbing this photo. She's screaming, and yet it appears as though the photo itself is not being damaged whatsoever by her stabbing it, which is fascinating. And also, there appears to be some sort of loop happening here.
It goes back
where
and
it's
forth.
like, where it's like she's stabbing it, and then it goes back, and the screen will go black for like a fraction of a second, and then it just keeps going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. Apparently this whole event here has really, really upset Sarah in a profound way. I don't know what to say about this. I mean, do you guys think that this event here has anything to do with Laura being pulled from Cooper's grasp in the next scene?
I do.
Yeah.
I
Me
think.
too, yeah.
I think there's no. I don't know. I'm a firm believer that the things you see on the screen are just kind of all you can really take as gospel. So for me to have these scenes cut the way that they are, I can't help but see Sarah's reaction. I can't help but see this as Sarah's reaction to what we, the viewer, just saw, and then what happens directly afterwards as somewhat of a not a reaction to that, but like a consequence of that. And I think it would make sense that, I mean, we've seen Laura whoosh off into nothingness in part 2, and I think we definitely are meant to see this as a parallel to that based on all of this, the sound design that we get that is similar.
Yeah, it's the same screen.
Same screen, but there's also, I think, the same whooshing sound. It's like the sound that you hear when Laura gets flung out of the lodge is the sound you hear when she gets sucked out of our existence. But I don't know if this was... I think that this was part of the plan. I think that this was part of what Cooper was hoping for. Otherwise, we wouldn't have what happens next. Like, we wouldn't have...
Well, that's my question. To me, this moment is probably the biggest hole in the theory that Laura was placed into this weird Odessa timeline by the forces of the White Lodge, because if he's leading her to Jackrabbit's palace and she clearly gets ripped away before then, and we agree that her being ripped away has something to do with this Judy force somehow becoming upset, then how does it...
Well, no, I
don't
see it that... Sorry if I interrupted you.
Okay, no, go ahead. No. Go ahead, because this is a part that I have some some trepidation, some confusion about.
Okay, well, I wrote an article called "Do You Really Want to Fuck with This? The Alternative Timeline of Sarah Palmer" on 25 Years Later site. In which I argued, not necessarily in the way that this is what I believe is the correct truth, but I kind of played around with the idea that what if this scene is a consequence, as you said, Dylan, also not like a reaction, but a consequence of what happened if in fact Agent Cooper somehow saved Laura Palmer from being murdered. And from the final dossier we learned that if she wasn't murdered, then she went missing instead. She's just a missing person. And in this article I'm thinking about what would happen to Sarah in the timeline where her daughter Laura would disappear and just from the face of the earth, and Leland Palmer committed suicide a year later, it would leave Sarah Palmer all alone, and again, but in another way, of course. But without the so to speak closure that you would have if you indeed knew that someone was dead, instead you go year after year after year with the pain of not knowing where your loved one is, because they are a missing person. And I can't even imagine, but I'm a true crime freak too, so I listen to a lot of podcasts about missing people, and I can't even imagine how it would be to have someone missing and not knowing of the fate of that person. So I played around with that thought, and in that kind of context, this scene with Sarah attacking basically this Laura Palmer picture was Sarah Palmer as a broken down person. I think we can all agree, considering I mean, it doesn't matter what timeline we're in, she's a broken person in both of them. So she's the really sad story in this bigger picture, I think. But in this article, this situation for Sarah was, I argued, so unbearable to handle that she didn't know what else to do, and she isn't mentally stable, and it could be some kind of manifestation to the grief of not knowing what happened to her daughter in the timeline where Agent Cooper rescued Laura and she was a missing person instead of a murdered person, and just out of her own mind, not necessarily to do with Judy or Judy or this negative force, but maybe just not to say only the grief, but the human grief is pretty powerful, could be pretty devastating as well. So it could be just that, in quotation marks, that made her just take out her frustration and her grief of the symbol of her grief, which is the photograph of her daughter. That's the way I wrote about it in the article. But yeah, I tended to still think about it in that kind of a way, because I refuse to see it as an evil act. I want to see it as something else. And I don't refuse to see it as an evil act because of some kind of principle, but it doesn't fit for me to see it as an evil act. It's not for me. Like I've heard a lot of people argue, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but I don't subscribe to the fact that she would be like the evil Judy or Judy is like attacking Laura Palmer out of evil. For me, it's a human reaction that she is doing for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I never read it as evil either. I always read it as like sort of a desperation.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
You know, yeah, and I think that I guess because of the way that, you know, like you mentioned, Dylan, the way that these scenes are edited together is what makes me really want to ascribe a cause and effect relationship to them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, we see her stabbing the photo, and then immediately the very next thing we see is, you know, Laura being sucked away. So there's just like, there's a part of me that just really wants that just really asks, like, well, why are we seeing these two events back to back? You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't seem like an accident to me that we see those two things juxtaposed so closely to each other. So as far as what exactly is happening in the literal sense, I don't know. I don't think that her stabbing the photo literally is what caused Laura to disappear from Cooper's grasp, but I do think that because of, again, you know, the cinematic language being deployed here, I think that we are meant to put together that whatever is causing Sarah to become so upset is the same force that causes Laura to disappear. You know, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I don't even. I mean, I guess another theory I have that, again, may or may not have any validity, but we're all kind of assuming that Judy is the one who takes Laura, probably because we see the Judy's diner, like when we get to Odessa, and and I'm not saying that it necessarily wasn't Judy, but on one hand, like, if something has touched Sarah Palmer, it, like, what we know about these entities is that they feed off of suffering and anguish, and Sarah's suffering and anguish is a direct result of all of the literal plot stuff that we've talked about, including her husband, you know, raping and murdering her daughter and then dying himself. But in the world where Laura never dies, that particular trauma isn't present, and that revisionism can potentially nullify like that Judy or the experiment hold over Sarah. And we could be seeing like an act of desperation from that entity, because it's not like we just see Sarah do this thing. We hear her like wailing and screaming and crying in the background for a good minute or two before this actually happens. It's a distressed character, and maybe you could view this attempt at stabbing her with a bottle, or the picture with a bottle, as the entity trying to recapture that same trauma, and the fact that the photo takes on no damage whatsoever could indicate that it's a futile attempt. What's done is done, and so then the consequence of that revisionism is that Laura Palmer doesn't disappear; she goes missing, and that is sort of what we see. We see her go missing, literally in that moment, from Cooper's hand. Whether or not he planned on it, I don't know. But he certainly had a plan in place for it to happen, and that's what 430 is. None of that would have had any relevance if Laura didn't go missing, and if there wasn't an Odessa.
Right.
So,
yeah,
we also don't...
I guess... Sorry, what's tripping me up is the fact that they don't actually go to Jack Rabbit's palace, though. That's the thing. Like, they don't actually reach the destination. So, like, my question remains, like, where does Laura go here?
Well, you know, none of us have mentioned yet the fact that whenever she disappears from his hand, you can hear the sound that the fireman is introducing to us in episode 1 or part 1, and I think that's of big importance in this situation. Like, he's telling him as well, you have to listen to the sounds, and then we hear that sound. It sounds like a scraping through metal or something like that.
Right.
And so I don't see it as the negative force is grabbing Laura from his hand. I see it as the fireman interfering with the timeline that Cooper is trying to create, just because he is doing it in a way that wasn't intended by the fireman.
Like he went rogue, kind of, and the fireman's correcting him somehow.
Yeah, because he realizes that you don't listen to me, you haven't, or
you didn't remember.
Either that, or he didn't remember, or maybe that scene that we saw, because that was from the very beginning of the return. I had this strong feeling that the scene with the fireman and Cooper that we see first of all after the see you again in 25 years, I had the feeling that this scene is not happening now. It's happening somewhere later, or it has already happened in some kind of way. It's not chronologically placed at all. So it might be that he has been at the fireman's already, and if that is the case, then he knows about that sound, and maybe he isn't listening to it. But it could also be that he is being corrected after the fact by the fireman.
Yeah, because it doesn't look to me like Cooper's expecting that to happen.
No, based on the long shot,
like,
the long shot we get of the woods, and he's just assuming he's just staring there, wondering what happened.
Yeah.
He looks worried, and he's surprised, and he doesn't know what to do quite. He's just standing watching nothing, it seems like.
Yeah. Oh boy. This show. So yeah, regardless, Laura has been saved, ? And now she is somewhere else. She is no longer in this timeline. She has been placed in a different reality, a different plane of existence of some sort. And yeah, this is the point at which we start to hear the familiar strains of an old Twin Peaks favorite, "The World Spins" by Julie Cruz. And yeah, was very happy to hear this. Apparently Julie Cruz was not happy about it though, because she was incredibly upset that they played credits over her performance, and that it was like sort of a truncated version of her song.
I was surprised to only see Julie Cruz for like 10 seconds. You're like, oh man, there's Julie Cruz, and then it's like, oh, credits.
Yeah, it was a bit weird, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm sure it was just like time constraints, you know, like.
But I think it's quite something that stands out to me here. That I think it's important, that it's the choice of song. Because in the original run, of course, we heard her singing, and saw her performing quite a few of the songs from the soundtrack. But this is the one that they chose for this, and I don't think, I have a gut feeling that it doesn't only have to do with the fact that this song is quite subtle, and you know, it's not rocking back inside my heart or someone. It's more subtle and you know, melancholic. But I think it also, we have to think about, in my opinion, when did we hear this song in the original run? For me, is pretty interesting to think about. What do you think?
Yeah, we see it. It's the we see it in the Lonely Souls episode, right?
Yeah,
that's when it happens.
Yeah,
when Maddie is murdered.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Cooper sees the giant, who we now know is the fireman, on stage.
And what does he do? He interferes, right?
Yeah.
So
he waves his hands around.
Yeah, so he's stepping in, saying, "Hey, you know, it is happening again." You know, so
right.
I think that's quite important, actually, for this song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I buy it. It's totally, it's appropriate on that level. It's appropriate thematically, and it's just appropriate musically too. It's just it just felt right to hear it in this moment.
Yeah, it did.
And you know, even if it was only like a minute of it or so, yeah, I definitely would have appreciated like a full version of it. I think it would have been even more powerful, because I really do like the way that the stage is lit in this instance, you know, because you have like the red curtains behind her, and all of her band is like shrouded in darkness, and you just have like the one shining light down on her, and it's really striking visually. And I think it would have made it even more resonant if we were able to marinate in this moment a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. And apart from other performances, I assume this is also to be at the Roadhouse. You can see the top of the heads of some of the people in the audience. But other than that, it might as well have been within the Black Lodge.
Yeah. That's totally. So yeah, that's it for this episode, man. This ended up being a pretty epic episode of 119. And it's appropriate because this episode, I mean, you know, it's like this episode, part 8, and the finale are probably the ones that demand the most investigation. So it's appropriate that this one ended up taking a little bit longer, I think.
I have no idea of how long we've been talking. What year is this?
I don't know. I have
no idea.
It could very well be 2019. So yeah, Gisela, thank you so much for coming on with us. This was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It was very interesting to hear you talking about this with me and to hear your thoughts about it. Really interesting and fun also. Yeah, thank you for letting me on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so everyone listening, if you have not already, go check out Gisela's YouTube channel. It's called Garmin Bozia. You can find her reaction videos there, as we've referenced, as well as some other Twin Peaks videos. She has like some compilations up there. She has a pretty long video where she answers a bunch of questions from other YouTube commenters and stuff, and as well as a bunch of her own music as well. So you want to check that out. And as we've referenced, she has a bunch of writing at 25 years later as well. So yeah, Dylan, buddy, we just got one left.
I'm sad.
It's incredible.
Man. This was so fun.
I know. It's wild. Yeah, we hope you guys will join us for not tomorrow. God, my brain is fried.
I can't do it tomorrow, Nick. Please don't make me.
Yeah, for next week's finale episode. It's just going to be me and Dylan. We're taking it old school. And by old school, we mean like 5 weeks ago, before we had guests on. So yeah, if you would like to find us on the internet, you can email us at 119podcast@gmail.com. You could find us on Twitter at 119podcast. My name is Nick. You can find me at Strenuous Orb on Twitter, and Dylan is on Twitter at PiffDylan. So yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks again to Gisela. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and we hope you guys will join us next week on 119, a Twin Peaks podcast. Thanks, guys.